Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'm back at it with yet another video, and today we are going to be talking about this summer's hottest transit, the Mars-Uranus conjunction taking place in Gemini. So very hot topic in the astro world. Honestly guys, the astrology for the next week is lit, and it is only the beginning of some of the things that are going to be popping off in the month of July. So if you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, click that bell button below so that way you can see more of my videos. I'm here on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays using tarot and astrology to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Please hype it and share it on your socials. While you're there, follow me on X at BTVAstro for more of my astro ramblings, and leave me a comment. What is happening over this July 4th for you guys? Where are the curveballs, the explosive situations, and the excitement taking place? Drop me your rising sign. I'd love to hear what you guys are experiencing as we all go through this together. All right, yeah, so much to talk about. It's going to be happening on the 4th of July, but many of you guys are actually watching on the 2nd. I've been talking about this transit for a while, and it's also a part of my horoscopes. But I am going to take you guys at the end of the video through the 12 rising signs and give you my predictions for how this is going to be manifesting for you. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. I've got a jam-packed video for you guys. We're going to be talking about the conjunction. We're also going to be talking about how it kind of correlates with the United States' 250th birthday. And honestly, guys, the US Sibley chart is lit. We've got a ton of returns that are taking place, not necessarily just the solar return. We have a Mercury retrograde, which is a part of America's natal Mercury retrograde, a lunar return, just so much stuff is going on. And I kind of see this transit as the gateway for some of the other things that are going to be playing out for the next several years. So we'll talk about some of the aspects, like Mars making a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. So that's going to be a part of it. And I'm also going to be talking about the historical kind of patterns and what we've seen under some of these Mars-Uranus conjunctions in the past, and talk a little bit about how we can kind of predict what's going to play out in the future. I've also got a master list for you guys to get really practical and really help you guys better understand what's happening, how to kind of prepare for it, how to navigate those curveballs like a pro. So this is going to be quite the video. So get comfortable, grab your charts, and we're going to drop in. All right, well, first of all, let's talk about what a conjunction really is. So most of you guys are watching on the 2nd, unless you're watching this on the 4th or on the 5th, and you're gonna be like, what the heck happened? Here's your explanation. Mars transits actually have a tendency to heat up rather quickly. I kind of see it almost like a stove. You turn the stove on and you can automatically start to kind of feel the heat that's kind of coming off of it. And then eventually, especially with like a Mars-Uranus conjunction, you're like, okay, yep, it's ready to go. The pan's ready to fry. So some of you guys are already feeling some of the effects by the time this video is dropping. And a conjunction in astrology, it basically means that we are fusing the kind of themes of these two particular planets together. So you have to see two planets that are occupying the exact same degree. Although I work with a 2-degree orb, so anywhere from Mars being at the 1st degree of Gemini, really yesterday into today, until about the 5th or 6th of July is when we're going to see this in motion. It means that there's no separation and there's no buffer between the two planets, and I think that's something that's important to kind of consider. It's very different than the ease maybe of a trine or a sextile. And this is basically saying that the planets are not actually at odds with each other. They're having to kind of merge. And these two are close enough to create some real friction. Now, that conjunction is a total fusion. So whatever Mars wants, Uranus is going to electrify. And that's what we really want to kind of think about. Whatever Uranus disrupts, Mars is going to react to, or it's going to respond to quite immediately. And there is not going to be any hesitation. So if there's any takeaway from this, it's that some of the impulsive things that are kind of coming up for us over the next couple of days are going to be rather dramatic. Now, when Mars and Uranus are together, this is actually astrologically considered to be one of the more volatile combinations that we see in the sky. Okay, I'm not going to candy coat it. Traditional astrology does see Mars as a malefic, and that's because this is a planet that deals with speed, cutting, burning, conflict, war, passion, self-defense. And Mars in Gemini doesn't necessarily fight with its hands, although it could, right? Gemini, it's more about words being weapons. So when we see the Mars-Uranus conjunction that are kind of coming together, what we're going to see is that Mars is the action. It is almost like the match that is lighting, and it's kind of connecting to Uranus's fuse. Now, when we see Mars aspects like this in the sky, we're going to see that it's kind of like the ignition, and then we're going to see Uranus is, you know, that shock. It's the surprise, the rebellion, the sudden change, or the lightning strike. This is a planet that has associations with technology as well as innovation, science, astrology, anything that's going to be really connected to those aha moments. And breakthroughs, I think, is another common theme that we see with Uranus. So you put the two together, and I really feel like what we're going to be finding is that we're not asking for permission for things. I think that's the big thing that's coming up this week. With that conjunction, there's no separation between them, so you get what it sounds like, pure fireworks, right? So the irony is that this is happening on America's birthday. Those of you guys who are not Americans, you know that we like to get crazy, we like to party, we like to blow stuff up. So fireworks are going to be a big theme, much bigger than usual, just given the nature of our 250th birthday. But we're also going to see that things are moving quite quickly. Things are rapidly accelerating. And this is where that electric energy does not want to wait, okay? So you may not be an American, this is going to happen all over the globe. Uranus is a planet that is about kind of uniting and bringing people together. And I do think that we're going to see just quite a few moments where there is going to be stuff going viral. We're going to see a lot of craziness that's kind of being put on news and media. Obviously, the internet is very much kind of connected to both Uranus as well as Aquarius. And so likely there's just going to be insane videos, I think, that's coming out about what people are saying, what they're thinking, that kind of freedom mindset, not just talking about it or thinking about it, acting on it. And we know that with Mars transits, you know, that can go one of two ways. Now, in the sign of Gemini, Uranus has been in and out of this sign for the better part of the last year. Now it's here to stay for the next several years. So every 2 years or so, we're going to see a Mars-Uranus conjunction in this sign. Gemini is mutable air, traditionally ruled by Mercury. So this is about the mind, movement, communication, learning, and it's a sign that is mutable. So it pivots, right? I think of Mars in Gemini, it's kind of like a butterfly. It'll kind of zig and zag and kind of go all over the place. And we're going to notice that communication, media, information, and technology all has this kind of speeding up effect, but also there is this dual nature to the things that we're talking about, the topics that are kind of hot on mainstream news. So this isn't going to show up, I think, as some kind of abstract, far-off event. It's going to show up most likely through words or anything that deals with transportation. So I'm thinking electric vehicles is very much Mars and Uranus in Gemini. I'm also thinking that there's going to be probably some big electrical issues or outages. I mean, I just got to tell you, having been on social media myself, I think one example of this building transit the last couple of days is what happened with T-Mobile. People who have T-Mobile accounts. So they're getting kind of raked over the coals right now. A lot of people are very angry on social media and, just all over the place because T-Mobile has rapidly decided to send out a text message letting all of their customers know that they are now being phased out of their mobile phone plans. Not everybody's affected, but a lot of people are. And now they're going to be charging more and you have to move to a new plan. And I was like, oh, Mars, Uranus, Gemini is phones, Uranus is going to be that public response. A lot of people are angry, and I would imagine that customer service is just ringing off the hook. And so that's only one example. We'll see lots of other things that I think are going to be these kind of bandwagon moments where everybody is banding together and kind of shouting, I think, the same kind of frustration maybe like into the void. I also think that, what we'll find is that, sudden conversations are going to come up during this transit. Unexpected texts, phone calls, emails, viral headlines. Watch for the tech glitches, especially as we're in the midst of Mercury retrograde. And there's going to be lightning fast developments in information itself. Now, one of the more kind of bigger aspects I think that I would be watching for is the fact that we're going to have a trine between Mars and Uranus that's also building to Pluto in Aquarius. So anytime we're looking at a planet in Aquarius, I'm always going to say to myself, where is Uranus? Because if there is a retrograde or if there's an aspect to Pluto, I need to see what Uranus is doing. And they're actually starting to form a trine. And you guys will actually see that in the backdrop in all of July. And it's really creating a on and off pattern that's going to play out for like the next year or so. Now, trines are the energy of Jupiter, right? It makes everything bigger. So everything flows bigger, but situations can also get blown out of proportion. So when we think about a trine between some heavy hitters like Mars, Uranus to Pluto, which is the god of rebirth, regeneration, it is retrograde, so it is revealing some of the drama, some of the crime, the corruption, some of the dark side of things that I think is what's going to be taking the internet by storm. Obviously, a Mars-Pluto trine is very powerful. We see a lot of will, we see a lot of determination. And it's being really, I think, kind of seen through the lens of the element of air. So this is about information, technology, social connections, learning, anything that also deals with, anything connected to science even, I think would be very much kind of Uranus and Aquarius. So with Mars trining Pluto, there is going to be this will to fight and to stand up or defend something. And people are going to be very passionate and they're also going to be very intense. So the trine can go one of two ways. We can feel regenerated. We can feel like we have a lot of confidence and charisma, but it also means that we could be a lot more intense. There is a tendency to be really building towards exposing things, doing research, bringing information, to the masses with the Mars-Pluto trine. And then with Uranus in a trine to Pluto, it tells me that whatever is being revealed, about Aquarius topics. So this could be about humanitarian movements. It could be about rapid changes that's happening with technology. Think of Aquarius as something that's connected to Congress or Senate, even the Supreme Court. People who sit on panels or decisions that are made by groups of people that will highly affect and impact Gemini areas: education, transportation, communication, social media, and how we connect worldwide. So whatever is building is likely going to be something that is going to be roaring come the end of the month of July when we see what will eventually be a full moon in Aquarius. And if you guys haven't seen that, we'll take a peek at it. But that full moon is going to be conjunct Pluto the day that the sun is meeting with Jupiter. So we're going to see, are we going to the light side? Are we shining a light on things? Are we making it bigger? Are we really putting a spotlight on, obviously, Leo, where there could be more creativity, more life, more joy? I think more of an effect of feeling a little boastful or even like egotistical. Well, suddenly now that Jupiter's in Leo, everybody's going to be like, well, what about me? How does this affect me? And obviously nobody wants to be under the thumb of Pluto. So that Pluto full moon is really going to be showing us the dramatic effects that will be taking place at the end of July. That all links back to the eclipse that we had in Aquarius in February of this year. So what I'm trying to explain is essentially, this is not a transit that's happening in one isolated couple-day period. It's a part of a bigger conversation that we're going to be having in July about power. Whether this is going to be energy, things that are connected to utility companies, where we're seeing rapid development that's going to be taking place, obviously with technology, and how that is impacting who has control of how much power we are able to kind of have access to. I don't remember where it was. I want to say it was somewhere in the UK, and I think I saw some stuff also in the northern parts of the United States. They were saying that there was a data center that was built very close to like an elementary school. And they're now supposedly making comments and talking to the school, associating, back and forth with the data centers, saying, we're using a lot of power. We need the power. It's affecting, how the data center is going to run. Why don't you go ahead and turn the lights off when the kids are in school? What? And that's very much, sun, kind of the sun, solar energy, I think of Jupiter in Leo and that opposition to Pluto, where it's like, wait a second, you're making decisions about how, these kids are in the environment the kids are going to be in. Like, how are kids going to be able to read and connect and communicate if you have the lights off all of the time? We're going to have a bunch of sleepy kids. So that's another example that I was like, wow, I could imagine that there's going to be some community outrage, community is Gemini, about the rapid changes and the decisions that are being made about education. And this is going to be primarily, kindergarten, elementary school, maybe even middle school. Leo is going to be more high school students. So this conjunction isn't traveling alone, I guess is really what I'm getting at. The very next day on the 5th is when we're going to see Mars forming a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. And obviously we know that trine is an easy angle. So this is one aspect of the window that I think is actually more so cooperating rather than kind of clashing. And that might temper some of the energies that we're going to see that can be more intense with Mars and Uranus. So right after the shock of the conjunction on July 4th, then we get a Mars that's going to be trining Pluto in a smooth supported kind of channel. So it can transform, it can structure power, but I have a feeling some of the things people are going to be saying, some of the things that people are going to be posting, some of the things that people are going to be doing locally may be met with some significant reevaluation of, well, just how much freedom, Pluto retrograde, should these people have? So we're in a world right now where there's a lot of talk about real ID. There's a lot of talk about whether or not there's going to be digital IDs in certain countries around the world. Who is going to have access to the internet? We're also seeing all kinds of things that are being passed through Congress right now. All of these acts that sound good, it's going to protect children and it's going to determine what kids can view online. And I think all of us agree, yes, we want to make sure we know what our young ones are kind of looking at. But I would caution you against just immediately going along with it, being like, yes, this is going to be a good thing, because when you start to really dig deep into some of these documents, you start to see that it's going to have a lot of access to our privacy when it comes to what we're buying, what we're saying, and I think it's going to be just a lot of that kind of like, technocratic overlord type stuff with Pluto and Aquarius, really watching where we're going and what we're doing. Personally, I'm very passionate about this. I live in Central Texas, and something that I've been following is the development of the flock cameras that have been happening all across the United States. And to me, it quite frankly freaks me out, because you've got some of these flock cameras that are pointed at private residences, some that are literally looking at like parks and areas where there's going to be kids, and obviously these are underage individuals, and there's no parental consent for their children being filmed, which I think is very bizarre. And also just all throughout, parts of my city. And so I was like, what, where is this information going? What are they scanning? What are they looking for? Is there a third party maybe that has access to this information? Is it being, given to the local police? And is this not an invasion of privacy? So I took it upon myself to file a FOIA request. So for those of you guys who don't know, the Freedom of Information Act basically gives us the right as American citizens to request documents and kind of get information about really pretty much anything. And so I, went through the legwork of trying to structure all of this with all of the appropriate legal jargon, thanks AI, so I could send this to my local records clerk. And I laid it all out. I said, I want to know why this is happening. What information are you pulling? Because there's speculation that they're actually profiling all of the vehicles. And it's not just looking just at your license plate. It's actually supposedly looking at if there's any wear or tear on the car so it can be identified. Supposedly, it has some kind of connection where it can determine if it's a Bluetooth versus a person. So if you're driving around with your phone in your car, it knows where you are. It can also be connecting to Bluetooth in your vehicle. And I was just like, who has this information? Why? And is this being given to the police? And are you guys kind of profiling people when citizens aren't doing anything wrong? So I waited 2 weeks. Got my response from our local records clerk, and they responded and they said, well, here's the website for Flock. You can go and look at it and you can read all about it. And your other questions that you have asked, we're sending to your general attorney here, in Texas. And I was like, great, this is going to take a while. 2 weeks later, I get my records request back, and they respond by telling me they will not respond. They will not give me any further information. I've only been directed to the website. They wouldn't tell me if my information was being given to the police, if it's going into a database, or if a third party has access to this information. Kind of concerning, right? So I was doing that because Mars and Uranus obviously got me curious, and some of the trines to Pluto made me realize that unless individuals in their local communities start getting involved in the rules and the regulations and all of the red tape, showing up at local council, voting locally, and getting involved, we are slowly going to start to see that the kind of digital cages are kind of coming down. Now, I think practically, when I think about the Mars-Uranus conjunction, really what this tells me is that, both through the trines, I think that both Uranus and Mars are going to have to Pluto, we're going to see that this means there is going to be some disruption. And if there are some bad actors or some bad apples that are causing some problems over the next week, we could actually see that this is some kind of intentional warfare that is being generated. Now, we could see this locally. We could also see this at, in elementary schools or with education. We could also see this potentially being online, that, there could be trolls, there could be bots, things that are actually stirring up and bringing up some really combative kind of verbiage, I guess, online, and inciting conflict or encouraging people to go and act, Uranian. And as a result of that, I think with the trine to Pluto, it may put us in a position where it may impact our freedoms, because Aquarius deals with freedom. So the Mars-Uranus spark, it's not just going to dissipate into chaos. There are other things that are going to play out throughout the month of July, like this sextile between Neptune in Aries, and obviously Neptune in Aries is also simultaneously sextiling Mars and Uranus, and this will be coming into a sextile with Jupiter in Leo. So you guys have seen the video that I did on the basket, where I talk about how dramatic the Jupiter in Leo opposed Pluto in Aquarius is. And we're going to see that pretty much all month long, but that the supporting aspects of the basket, Neptune to Uranus, and then the sextile, and then the trine, is basically saying it can pull us away from the trauma drama, from the power struggle, from the intensity that's going on in the world. In order to do that, we have to really lean into Neptune and Aries. We have to be very clear about our identities, who we are, where we're becoming disillusioned, and where we've lost the plot. Now, it also is good for, tapping into our intuition, being a little better aware of our identities and kind of guiding ourselves and trying to be more of like a peaceful warrior. We've also got this, Uranus that's in Gemini, which means we can quickly shift the way that we communicate, the way that we talk. And I think that we will get that later in July, but I think right now it's a little bit of some fighting words, I think, that are kind of coming up. And it really has the opportunity, I think, if we use it correctly, to be quite, productive. Mars trine Pluto is fantastic for finally taking decisive action on something that we have felt powerless about. And really, it's about confronting a deep pattern with real follow through. Or maybe it's for using a sudden burst of motivation to actually transform a situation that has felt stuck, rather than just blowing it up. So think of the conjunction, like I said, as kind of the match that's lighting the spark, and then the trine the next day is really going to be the engine that knows exactly what to do with the spark. Now, if we think about the historical patterns and when we've seen Mars-Uranus conjunctions, they're really not that unusual. We see it every 2 years. This is going to be the start of a new cycle, so I just want to put that out there. Next year, we're going to be seeing that Mars will be going through Sagittarius and it will form an opposition. And honestly, I haven't quite looked at this yet, but this is that fusion point where some of the things that are going to be happening in early July is going to set the stage for, I can only speculate, once Mars is in Sagittarius and it's opposing, major changes to legal systems, things connected to the Supreme Court, things that are also associated with travel, higher education. And then the fight is actually being taken to, the international courts, or it's being taken to the colleges, or something that's going to be associated with kind of the higher mind. Mars and Uranus are also still locked into a square with the North and the South node. So we go back to June, the North and South node in Pisces and Virgo have also been squaring Uranus. So I kind of see this as like a pressure cooker. And we've felt that nervousness mentally, I think, with Uranus and Gemini. There has been this sense of feeling kind of flighty, and then Mars comes in and it's ready to just pop off. Now, the day that we're going to see the, obviously, the Mars-Uranus conjunction, it's going to happen in the early morning hours. So I'm here in Central Texas. It's going to be right around 1 a.m. Central Time on 4th of July. So I don't think we're going to be waiting for, the evening of the 4th to see the fireworks. I think they're going to be starting the day before. Now, the moon is going to be moving through Aquarius, and this should look familiar to those of you guys who are familiar with the Sibley chart for the United States. The moon is going through Aquarius, and it's going to hit 29 degrees, and that's a critical degree. The North Node is about to be there. It's conjunct also where we had the eclipse in February, which was already going to rile some of the masses because at the time it was squaring Uranus in Taurus. And it was the setup, basically, as we got into the month of July when we had that closing full moon to, well, bring on the revolution, I guess I would say. 29 degrees is a critical degree, so the fact that it's going to hit that, it's going to be the U.S. lunar return for the month, and then we see this Mars-Uranus square the nodes. Oh boy. But let's go back to some of the historical connections here. This is where things, I think, get really fascinating. I personally believe what's going to separate a decent astrologer from a great astrologer is not just somebody who is going to study cycles of what's been happening, maybe, let's say, the last couple of years. We need to zoom out. We need to get that, like, 5,000, kind of foot view. This tells me with the conjunction that we have to look back on what has happened during similar cycles. Now, we're always going to have some planets in different places, so I want to kind of preface that. Not all of them are going to have the trine to Pluto. Not all of them are going to be in Gemini. And they're not going to have some of the supporting kind of sextiles that we see between Jupiter and Neptune. But I go back and I think about the United States and the American Revolution, right? And really, not a lot of people realize we were officially America and we were free in 1776, but in 1775 is when we really started to see the intensity, begin to kind of ratchet up. Now, in 1775, this exact placement is actually what coincided with the opening shots, right? Gemini hand, Mars is a weapon, Uranus is poof. So the opening shots of the American Revolution, this was the battles of Lexington and Concord. And, the country was effectively, basically, like, born under this signature. We go a little bit further in time. We think about the spring of 1861. We saw Mars conjunct Uranus, and this is when the Confederate batteries opened fire on Fort Sumter, and this is where the Civil War began. And then in November of 1911, Mars went retrograde in Gemini, and it lined up with the very first bomb ever dropped from an aircraft. And this was during the Italo-Turkish War. And it was a small event at the time, but it kind of opened the door to an entire century of aerial warfare. Gemini, air, right? Mars, conflict. Uranus, sudden. Then in August of 1945, Mars moved into the conjunction with Uranus, and this peaked around August 17th, right in the window of when the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Japan's surrender. And the last time this conjunction happened, specifically in Gemini, Mars and Uranus, the same one that we're going to be having right now, was in August of 1947. Now, this was the year that the Cold War crystallized, the CIA was founded, and there was a partition of India and Pakistan, which actually produced one of the countries, both countries' largest and bloodiest mass migrations in some time. Now, I want to be really clear about all of this and ground it. The Mars conjunction with Uranus, this personally may not manifest as something that's totally chaotic for you. And we'll talk about some of the aspects that are going to get hit in a second. So it may not have some of the intense personal effects unless you happen to be ruled by Mars. So if you're a Scorpio or an Aries rising, if you have any planets around the first 5 degrees of Gemini, if you happen to be an Aquarius rising because you're ruled by Uranus, these are the people that are going to get hit, I think, the hardest. That and anybody who has anything about 0 to 5 degrees of the mutable signs. So not just Gemini, but Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces as well. So the personal stuff, you may not see it immediately. You'll see some sparks at the beginning of the month that you'll start to better understand in a bigger way, I think, by the end of July. But on a world level, when we see these types of aspects, historically, the correlations are very real, right? They represent that outer edge of what's possible, and it's not a guarantee. But what is consistent every single time within several days of these particular aspects is there is a quality of suddenness. There is this electric intensity, and sometimes it's the beginning of war. Sometimes it's a sudden breakthrough that we see with technology, but most of the time it's a little bit kind of in between. Now, the conjunction is interesting because, the United States, and I'll show you guys the chart here really quick. The United States was actually born with a lot of these aspects. So this is the Sibley chart. I know there's several different variations of the US chart. This is the one that I use. Sag rising, it's got Mars in Gemini, Uranus in Gemini, Moon in Aquarius, Mercury retrograde in Cancer, Sun in Cancer. So if you guys compare, so like let's say this was like a natal chart, right? We're gonna look at let's see if I can pull this back up. No. We're gonna look at the July 4th, when this is happening. And one thing that I want you guys to really look at is look at how many things are lining up. And it's not unusual when you have a solar return, that there is also going to be a Venus return or a Mercury return, because these planets move very closely with the sun. But what strikes me is the Mercury retrograde is the same phase that we're experiencing that the United States had when we were born. And Mercury retrograde in Cancer is a lot of what does home mean, right? How can we experience better security? And if you guys know anything about American history, really kind of starting off with, pilgrims coming here and, deciding that they wanted to have religious freedoms, and then it materialized into what the United States is today. There's always been this deeper conversation about what it means to have home, have security, have family. And so obviously the American dream, I think, is partly kind of connected to that. Mercury retrograde can also be constant, patterns and cycles throughout time, that it's changing, it's evolving, it's developing into new things. And it's at 24, so that's going to be very intuitive. Obviously a lot of people in the United States are very divided right now, but I'm seeing a lot of people who are very patriotic. And I've heard from a lot of people recently who've been traveling, and then they're coming back to the United States and they're like, wow, I'm so happy to be home. Like, it was cool to see other cultures and be places, but I realize how much I take for granted when I'm here. And in the midst of World Cup, we're seeing a lot of people from all over the globe that are coming to the United States. They're visiting for the first time. They're trying the food. They're, going to barbecues. They're meeting people, and they're realizing the media and what I've been told about your country is so different. And I saw a post the other day that was so cool. It was like, if you want to hate America, watch the news, but if you want to truly know America, drive through the country. And I was like, Mercury retrograde in Cancer, go and explore and get a little bit deeper and see what it's all about. We've got the solar return, which is going to be happening hours later. The sun's going to have to come into conjunction with 13 degrees, and that'll be the solar return. But we've got Mars and Uranus that are both in the same sign, okay? So I think this is rather important. This is the last time that we're going to see Mars and Uranus coming into conjunction prior to the United States going into its Uranus return. So this is the build-up, basically, to what will eventually be, I think, and I've said this for a very long time. You guys can go back, you can watch my videos that I was doing for like Astrology. And I remember doing a video for her, I think it was in 2017 or 2018. It was before COVID. And I remember like screaming from the rooftops being like, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, South Node in Capricorn, like the world's gonna end. And everybody thought I was fucking insane. And I was like, dude, something's coming and it's gonna be bad. And it's gonna be about, everything being kind of taken over, I think, by government and also by big institutions. Well, not to toot my own horn, but that certainly happened. And I also was talking a lot about that time that I had dreams. I've always had dreams about stuff about the future, but I had dreams about closer to 2030. It seemed like 2030 to 2034, if I remember correctly. And I remember looking at a calendar in my dream, which was weird. And I saw that the United States was fractured, okay? And some may argue it already is. Stay with me. But it was fractured in a way where it was kind of like Europe, where you've got the United Nations, you've got the EU, but you have all of these separate kind of, like countries. You've got France, Europe, Spain, Prague, Switzerland, all that stuff, but they're all separate. And so you could go to Europe and you can travel through there, but they're all gonna kind of have their own borders, right? And in the United States, we have the continental United States. You can drive through them. You're gonna go through, the line, so you're crossing from one state to the other. But I actually saw in the dream that certain states broke away from what was the actual union.
and that certain states banded together and they were going to limit trade. They were going to become their own kind of entities. Some of them were going to, have total, like feast opportunities because their communities would be booming. Their states would be really seeing because of their production. Lots of really good things happening, but other states were very isolated. They were very separate. They were impoverished. There was like a lot of, sour things going on for certain parts of the country. And so I think about that dream a lot. And I think about the incoming Uranus kind of transit, and that it's inevitable that we are going to be dealing with some relational issues. And that's because Uranus is really close to the descendant in the 7th house. So this means that, unfortunately, the United States has a reputation for kind of, being the biggest bully, I think, on the schoolyard, and creating a lot of conflict or a lot of disruption and a lot of back and forth with other countries. And I think that's fair to say. Obviously, we're a country that's got tons and tons and tons of military bases all over the world. And it's also fair to say that, unfortunately, we have been involved in a lot of proxy wars. We've been involved in a lot of basically regime changes in other countries. And we kind of say this under the guise of, well, we're trying to protect everyone. So we have kind of put ourselves in this position of having to be the mediator or even the protector for the world. Now, with that being said, with Uranus coming into conjunction, it's going to get up to about 5 degrees this year, so it's within range. But this is the last conjunction between Mars and Uranus before we have the Uranus return. So I just want to kind of preface this. I think, the Sibley chart's one of the most utilized charts when we look at the United States. And with Mars sitting at 21 degrees, this means that the fight is generally going to be with foreigners. It rules the 12th house. Now, this could mean karmic wars, conflict that's connected to hidden enemies, anything that's potentially going to be secret attacks and really kind of outing other people, or that potentially working against the United States, because the 12th house does represent something that we cannot see, self-sabotage, international conflict. But I think of like the Cold War that happened, obviously under one of these conjunctions, and it really became an information war. And so that's Gemini in a nutshell. It's information, data, what information is being passed between countries, what access we're giving other countries to, have privileged information that we kind of have, and potentially where we're creating conflict or trying to actually forge new relationships. It's very much Mars in the 7th house. So we see Uranus is sitting at 8 degrees. 8 degrees is a degree that deals with obviously Scorpio themes. So crime, corruption, the darkness, abuse, death, rebirth. And so obviously if we think back to the founding fathers, the beginning of the revolution, the US revolution, obviously a lot of people died, right? And we saw that they were fighting essentially their brothers, right? The United States came from England. We came from the UK. Now, they may have been born in the United States. They may have a different dialect. I think that's very much Uranus and Gemini. The reality is that we, in some ways, are very much related to them. And so there was this breaking off and this severing from that kind of, brotherhood. Then we think about the Civil War and what happened with the Civil War between the North and the South, that we had actual people who were neighboring states fighting against each other, and that divisiveness and the dramatic change and also the relationship shift, the narrative shift in terms of, are we really united? So I think about all that stuff. I think that it's not really a coincidence that this is happening right now. I'm sure there's other astrologers talking about that. I also think that when Mars and Uranus are now returning to the same sign, the United States is kind of playing with a lot of home field advantage. So America is going to be very American, good or bad, especially over the next month. Now, this activation is connected to the natal signature, and it's sometimes kind of described, this particular conjunction, as the opening of America's Mars-Uranus return season. Both planets cycling back through the sign that they occupied when the country was born. So we're going to see that, that landing on the 250th anniversary of the nation's founding is definitely going to create some fireworks. I want to be really precise here though. So, Mars is quite far away from the natal Mars. It's much closer to Uranus. And this is why I said that it's not going to happen in one chunk. We're going to see Mars will come into conjunction with the descendant. So I'm anticipating there is going to be some intensity here when Mars hits 12. That'll be around July 16th. And then we are also going to see the Mars return, which is going to happen here. And that's right around July 29th. Now, this is going to be the day to watch. When we have the full moon in Aquarius, where the moon is meeting with Pluto, conjunct America's south node in the second house, which could deal with money, banking, resources, AI, right? Digital assets, second house, losses. And then we're going to see, on the other hand, the Sun and Jupiter are meeting on the north node. Now, I'm a Placidus astrologer through and through. If you look at this from the lens of the whole sign system, this will be in the third house, where neighborhoods are definitely going to be experiencing a lot of drama. There's going to be a lot of intensity revolving around information, communication, travel, while the Sun and Jupiter are going to be meeting on America's north node. So what is America trying to do? Well, we're going to see some major, throughout this year, some major, I think, court decisions that are going to be heating up. If you're watching this at the beginning of July, you know, there's been a lot of back and forth about the Supreme Court and the decisions that they're making about birthright citizenship. From what I understand, it looks like, you know, that still stands. It's been kind of like overturned. I speculate that that's also kind of connected to Mercury's retrograde, where there's been a reviewing and going back to what does it mean to be American? And Mercury is travelers. Mercury can also be associated with communications, language, documents. And so that's something that I think down the road, as we're getting into later this year and really the beginning of 2027, when we see Mars and Jupiter in the south node in Leo, there's going to be a lot of big leadership and legal decisions, I think, about, well, where you can travel and actually give birth. Cancer is more about that process of things still being in the womb and still being safe and protected. Leo is when something is actually born. It's that first roar of life. So I think this will be a situation that's going to continue to kind of go on. We're probably going to hear about a lot of other things that are connected to reproductive rights, and also things that may even be connected to, well, love. Leo is love. So whether or not there's going to be a back and forth about marriage, about laws pertaining to children. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, Jupiter in Leo is actually going to protect life. It's going to protect children. It's going to protect creatives. It's going to protect entrepreneurs. But we have to get past this opposition to Pluto. And the conspiracy theorist in me is saying there is most likely, just with Mars and Uranus being tied to, well, things that deal with travel. So I think commuters, I think of trains, I think buses. I also think of anything that could fly in the sky, that we could potentially see some major potential concern for terrorist-related activities. And what better time, I would assume they would be thinking, than to do that around America's birthday. I hope I'm wrong. I do. I don't necessarily think it has to be on that particular day, but I almost guarantee you guys that before the end of July, we're going to see some major events that are going to be coming out where they're going to go, well, this thing happened, there's this crisis, therefore we have to pass this law, and it's going to be good, it's going to protect you. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, there's something about this I really don't trust. And I think a lot of it's also going to be about what information we're sharing pertaining to sensitive data, information, knowledge, you know, about what's kind of going on with world affairs and what we're giving to our allies, right? So there's going to be a lot of conversation about that. Anyway, I think the other thing that's important to kind of mention, so let's go back to the 14th. Excuse me, the 4th. What else is important to mention is that Mercury and Mars are being heavily influenced by this Mercury retrograde. So Mercury is associated with Gemini. It is currently retrograde in the sky. It looks like right around the end of the day on the 4th going into the 5th, America is going to have its second Mercury retrograde. Now, we already had one when it went into shadow. Now this is the second phase where it's going to be retrograding back. And it's going to be playing off of what's happening with Mars and Uranus. So the conflict, the outcry, the conversations, the passion, the movements, the conversations that are being had are really going to be about home, family, home ownership, things that are connected to, you know, citizenship, documents, and anything that's connected to your homeland. We're hearing a lot of stuff here in the United States where there is big decisions that are being made about, you know, whether or not people are going to have to go back to their home countries and if they're going to have a reversal of their visas. I think that's part of what's kind of going on too. And I think that really the conjunction is the opening spark of a much bigger configuration that astrologers are calling this magic triangle, or like I said, Barnabolt's basket. This is connected to Pluto, very close to the US South Node, where there is a lot of breaking down and restructuring and things that are going on with, I think, our spending. And obviously we've got Neptune in the fourth house, which my interpretation is like Pluto retrograde very close to the South Node, is that money is losing its power. And you have heard about how the United States, you know, the dollar is basically the world reserve currency, which sounds good in a way, but it actually makes our money, I think, like almost impossible to be able to grow and bring in like more resources, more stability. In many ways, it's, you know, creating a lot of issues that's connected to high, you know, costs of being able to produce here in the United States. I mean, we pretty much bring everything in for the most part from China, from other countries where it can be cheaper to produce. We're not in a surplus like China is, because we're sending everything out and it costs so much to, well, basically survive in America. So we're feeling the pressure of that through the crisis, I think, with Pluto on the South Node. We also are looking at that sextile to Neptune in the fourth house, whole sign fifth, but it is in the Placidus fourth, which is kind of the dissolving and the breaking down, or I would say some Americans looking around going, this is not the country I grew up in. It looks different. Things are very different in some parts of the country culturally. There's a lot of people who have come here. There is a lot of changes that's happened also with the landscape. Neptune is also connected to flooding, water events, things that are going to be dealing with extreme storms. We've got Aries, which is going to be heat. We've got Neptune, which is going to be water. I think we're going to be hearing a lot about issues with drought and things that are connected to water issues or shortages. And certainly Neptune in the fourth house is a lot of like, well, you know, if it's not working out here, and this is supposed to be one of the freest places in the world, where the hell am I going to go? So you've got a lot of people who are also contemplating relocating within the United States, but also looking elsewhere. This is sextiling Mars and Uranus, which is technically in the sixth. So this is also talking about a lot of people who I think are facing concerns about, well, can I have the American dream? How can I, Saturn, Neptune, afford or be able to survive on my own? Especially with a lot of changes going on with jobs. I think Mars and Uranus right now in the sixth house is changes that are going on with jobs. There's a lot of people who are very vocal about some of the concerns that they have about where there has been issues with immigration and whether or not Americans are losing out on potential jobs. That's up for debate. In the sixth house, this could also be issues connected to services. So I think internet services, Wi-Fi, anything that's connected to mobile related things, media. And then obviously we've got the sextile to Pluto in the eighth, which in theory sounds good, right? A lot of people look at that transit and they go, well, you're going to have, you know, some kind of wealth that's going to be given to you, or you're going to inherit something. But Jupiter makes things bigger. So the drama of, well, the debt, the deficit, issues kind of connecting to taxes, you know, that kind of stuff feels all that much bigger to me. And I think it's going to be a hot topic, especially kind of like legally. That's just my opinion. And if we think about putting all of this stuff together, the centerpiece really is going to be Uranus trine Pluto and Mars conjunct Uranus. And that's really setting up after the Mars-Uranus conjunction closer to around the 18th. So let's move forward. So you're going to start to see on the 18th, this is when you're going to see this trine to Pluto, okay? And Uranus is going to get up to about 5 degrees. So Uranus is also disrupting jobs, making changes with healthcare, and the fallout or the potential changes that are happening with resources. And to be fair, from an astrological perspective, you know, that South Node is also going to talk about, well, this is the karmic reckoning. You know, if you just spend on, well, Pluto, war or conflict with other countries, yes, eventually you're going to see that things are going to kind of break down. I think that, you know, with some of the aspects that are going to be kind of hanging out for the next month, a lot of astrologers are really watching this window, and all of us are kind of flagging a few different areas to be like, well, this is what we think is going to happen. We can only speculate on the possibilities. But I'm predicting there's going to be technological shocks. I think there could be quite a significant cyber attack on infrastructure, given Gemini's kind of rulership over networks and communication. Sudden explosive information releases. I mean, come on, Mercury retrograde, in America's 8th house. I could definitely see that being a time where we are kind of going back through some of the things that need to be released. Now, will that be dropped on the 4th of July? I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at more what's going to happen with the Cazimi around July the 12th, when the Sun and Mercury come into conjunction, and I can only speculate at a 20 that there is going to be some jaw-dropping information that's going to possibly be released. Well, look at this. The moon is being influenced by the Sun and Mercury. We've got mutual reception between Mercury and a lunar sign, moon and a mercurial sign, and the moon is conjunct Mars. Where other states may potentially be trying to release information that would really disrupt the United States. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting. Who has what on who is the question that I keep asking myself. And certainly, Gemini, it's going to have an association with a bunch of different countries, so I'm not going to kind of speculate. But I do think that we could see, somebody who we may consider an ally kind of out themselves. And we realize that it's like, whoa, they're playing two sides against the middle, or, they're saying one thing to us, but then they're doing something over there. And likely it would be somebody that we consider brothers. So I don't know, is it tied to Gemini and London in the UK and the central banking, certainly with Mercury retrograde? Are we getting out of certain financial systems? Are we moving into a new system? Could it be tied potentially to one of the countries that we would consider our brothers? We've got, Canada above us, we've got Mexico, and certainly all kinds of places in Central America that are going to be beneath us. I don't know. But I can tell you that the United States is definitely squaring off with some kind of an opponent. And that's basically what's going to be coming up. Now, generally, like I said, Mars and Gemini is fighting with words, but I think it's going to be more where countries are really using the media to weaponize things. Maybe they're looking at hitting power grids or anything that's going to kind of impact people being able to kind of come and go from places. That's something else that I think about. And also, I think we're just going to be seeing, leaks, whistleblower events, and revelations that shift the narrative overnight. This will likely bring some geopolitical kind of flashpoints that are tied to existing kind of tensions that we already have, especially anything involving foreign adversaries. Given the 7th house activation, I think it's that. And also, we're going to be seeing an increased kind of activity with seismic events, obviously along like the Pacific Ring of Fire, since Uranus has a historical correlation with sudden geological events. We just had another earthquake in Japan as of the 2nd of July. We also just saw, I think it was a 6 magnitude earthquake in Mexico. The Mars-Uranus conjunction is going to run directly through Southern California. It's going to go directly through Los Angeles. And obviously there's a lot of back and forth over what's going on with the elections there. It's very common when you see Mars and Uranus that there are people in the street. And so that could also be part of what's kind of, boiling up is there tension about who is trying to infiltrate some of our election processes. And when you think about that, it sounds kind of silly, right? Because we've heard a lot of things about voting ID. We've heard a lot of things about voting machines and everything that we can do to make, voting efficient and make it fair. But the bigger question is who is actually in the pockets of some of these politicians? That's what I've been asking myself. And this is a tale as old as time. Everybody's getting paid. We don't see presidents and congressmen and women and people who come into office making a lot of money, okay? And so something I've been really kind of watching recently is, I've been watching the APAC tracker. I'm looking at who's getting paid potentially to make decisions about United States kind of laws. That's something that I think as a United States citizen is very important, because I want to make sure that those people, because they're working for the United States, basically like the country, like citizens, they need to be listening to these voices, and citizens' voices are going to get very strong. So I've been thinking about who's going to get outed? Are we going to be seeing things like we've seen recently in Southern California? There was I believe it was I think it was a mayor. It was like a woman who literally testified and admitted that she was basically associated with the CCP. But she was running, I believe it was like Arcadia in California, which if you guys are in Southern California, you know where that is. It's a very, very big kind of area. Crazy stuff. And so I think that it's going to be about who is acting like an ally and telling us one thing, but doing something else. And people are definitely going to start getting outed. Okay, so what we're also going to be seeing is this is going to play out over the holiday weekend. Gemini's connection to short distance journeys is important. Speeding, texting and driving, road rage, incidents where there's going to be, I think, a lot more accidents or pileups. Like these are things just generally that we can kind of see with this. So that's something that you guys want to kind of take into consideration if you're going to be potentially traveling. Now let's go back to the transit. And let's talk more about how this is going to be kind of impacting you guys more so personally, because I don't know about you, but whatever's going to happen on the world stage is going to kind of happen. And I feel like that Mars-Uranus energy is just kind of like, well, we're just going to watch the world burn. And to some extent, the media is going to be hyping a lot of this stuff up, I think, just to kind of get people distracted. So even though some of you guys are going to feel like, well, you want to have your eyes glued to the screen and you want to see what's going on and what's happening, I would really encourage you guys to take a step back and be like, don't get sucked into whatever the news is trying to put out there. Because usually when that stuff is going on, there is distraction. Why, hey, look at what we're kind of doing over here. With Mercury retrograde, it's possibly going to be some big changes that's going to be revolving around, like I said, property, housing. Just recently this week in Florida, apparently they completely abolished property tax. Now, my husband was telling me, he's like, well, it's state tax. I don't know how it's going to work with counties. And obviously, I'm sure the money is going to come from somewhere. They're going to find a way to institute a new sales tax or something. But that's one of, I think, the more kind of positive shifts that I've seen so far during the Mercury retrograde, and it's only been a couple days. Will other states catch on? And will that incentivize some people, Mars-Uranus, to say, you know what, we're going to move. I'm not liking having to pay these high taxes here. I never feel like I own my home. Let me go somewhere else. Possibly. Are they also doing this maybe to kind of save certain real estate, kind of areas? Yeah. I mean, Florida's probably, I think right now, one of the states that's hurting the most. But ironically, you see like a lot of like mega tech bros and like billionaires and stuff kind of moving there. So I think it was what's his name from Facebook, just recently left California and he went to Florida. So I don't know, we're gonna see a lot of migration, I think, just in general with the Mercury retrograde and Mars conjunct Uranus. Now the question is what do you watch for personally? And this is where it really pays to know your chart. Pull your chart out, take a look at it. I want you to look at the house of Gemini, okay? That is the area where you are going to see the action taking place. Now it's gonna come through the lens of Gemini, so it may not mean something suddenly happens. It could mean you have a conversation, you learn something, right? Potentially there is a pivot or there is a change, or maybe you are more feeling your way into, because Mars is affecting Neptune and Neptune and Saturn. I can reimagine something. I can see myself moving forward. It's very much I think I can, especially with Saturn and Neptune and Aries. There can be this tendency, because Saturn doesn't do well there, to be like, I don't know if I can handle this. And then Mars and Uranus comes in and, you get a pep talk from your older sibling, or you have a neighbor that's just like, hey, I think you can handle it. Good job. Or look at what you were able to accomplish. That really suddenly shifts your mindset. So watch less for physical events, although they will happen. Watch more for shifts in your mindset. So really the bigger picture here, I think, for like a lot of us and how to work with it personally is the window is going to be really from July the 1st all the way through, I would say, July the 10th. And then the finale is going to come at the end of the month. Through the 10th is when we're going to see the most volatile few days. Maybe the hyper focus is going to be like the 3rd through the 5th. But by July the 10th, you're going to start to see things that are going to ease up. What you're going to want to watch for is this sudden, urgent feeling. And it could mean it's information, you're getting downloads. Maybe you sit down and you feel like you need to start journaling. You might feel like I got to do this right now, especially Mars and Uranus and Gemini. It's having me making a lot of to-do lists. It's like, okay, these are the things I have to do. and this is what I'm doing. Okay, it would be easier to move this around. And I'm like trying to get out of the box and figure out ways to kind of, well, kill two birds with one stone. Others are going to feel like this is about a text, an email, a phone call, some kind of breaking news, something that happens in your local environment, or something that is impacting your travel plans. Whatever it is, it's going to demand what feels like immediate action. And I would say, watch your impulse and response. We don't want to respond to things instantly. Why? Because Saturn is the connection, as is Neptune, to Mars. And so Neptune is like, am I seeing this clearly? I don't know. And then Saturn's like, oh no, that's a fake. That's not real, or that's not something that I should be doing, or that's beyond my kind of boundaries. And so it's influencing the Mars-Uranus, where we have this knee-jerk reaction where we're like, I gotta get in the car, I gotta go there now, or I'm gonna call that person and give them a piece of my mind. And Saturn is basically saying, don't let other people get your goat. Yes, there is gonna be this strong impulsive need to tell people off or give them some friendly hand gestures while you're in traffic. But if you take a step back and you resist the urge to create conflict, then you're really leaning into the power of change. And this is where one individual can make a conscious choice and a decision that could ripple out. It could also mean this is where individuals are waking up. And they're basically saying, you know what, like this is my Jerry Maguire moment. Who's coming with me? And this is where individuals are going to start banding together with local community and also spreading the word to impact the masses and create bigger change. Now, a little bit about the flock camera stuff that I was telling you guys about. So I've been pretty miffed about it. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do, literally contemplating like reaching out to Ken Paxton to be like, what the fuck? Why did you not give me this information? It is my right. And then I started kind of going on the internet, and I saw that there's this group of people that are in, I think it's New Jersey, and they're deflocking. Now, I need to put this out there right now. I'm not incentivizing you guys to do this. I'm not saying you should, although there are some very valuable materials in those flock cameras. They're going and they're taking them down. They're cutting them down. That's what they're doing. And so it's reminiscent of what we saw in the UK when they were starting to put up, those limits where you can go in and out of certain areas of certain kind of communities. And they were saying it was to test the 15-minute cities and incentivizing people to not have cars. But then the more that they got into it, they realized they could only leave so often. They would have to pay if they were going to have to come and go. And it became a hassle. And people were going and they were like basically tearing down like the systems and the cameras that were limiting them from where they were living. And when that happened, man, that was like, what, a year and a half, 2 years ago? I remember looking around being like, that's not going to fly here. Well, here we are, 2026, and now we're seeing that there is a whole campaign for, these people who started in New Jersey saying, you know what, we're going to fight the system. This is basically surveillance. We're not going to do it. Is it legal? Probably not, no. And we're already seeing that people are basically getting arrested for it. But where you see Mars and Uranus, these are the freedom fighters, okay? So it's important to remember, really think about what you're saying. Think about what you're posting. Think about what threats you're making. Even if it's on a keyboard behind a screen, there is potentially going to be some kind of reckoning for some of this stuff. So the smart energy, I really feel like when this sudden impulse comes in is, okay, yes, there's a flash of I need to do this now, but how can I do it differently? How can I use my instinct and also my sense of direction and leadership and vision to be able to affect change? And I think really it's an information war. Power is going to be to those who want to share the information and get it out to other people. How can you be a leader in your own right and inspire other people by saying, actually, no, I'm going to crack out, like the textbook, or I'm going to pull out the legal kind of document, or I'm going to do the research, I'm going to file the FOIA request, whatever, to be able to fight what's kind of coming, because this is only the beginning, guys, of some of the stuff that is to come. And once again, I have the concerns about whether or not there is going to be certain orchestrated events to create fear, to make people confused and kind of chaotic and kind of go, oh my God, we're afraid. Okay, fine, pass whatever you need to pass, or, make this big decision about what we can or cannot talk about. And when you have that flash of, I need to do it now, it's almost like your nervous system is going to kind of feel like it's jumping before your brain can catch up. And so something I've been telling people over the last, couple of weeks is like, look, Be very careful with any stimulants. Uranus is the nervous system. Gemini is the lungs. It's the arms. It's like the fingers and the hands. Mars is inflammation. And so, yeah, obviously it's materialized, as I said, with like the T-Mobile thing, where everybody's like fighting back about what's going on with the phones. But it also may be a really good idea this week to cut, to sever, to detach from your social media, from your phone. I can already feel that the North Node's getting ready to go into Aquarius. That's my natal North Node, and I was thinking about, just being alive like in the 2000s and what it was like to kind of, grow up at that time before cell phones, before, internet was just happening. We had to plug it into a wall and listen to it upload, and then we couldn't be on the phone. Some of you guys remember that and you're laughing, but other people are like, what is that? Or what is a burned CD? And so today it was weird. I got up and I was like going out and running some errands and working out, and I was like, I'm putting a CD in my CD player. I'm not listening to Spotify. And it was like weird. I don't usually do that. Okay. And then I came home and I was going back and forth with the T-Mobile stuff because I'm a customer, and I was like, fuck this. I was like, I don't need to be spending, $80 a month for a cell phone, and it's a cell phone that I need to be sitting on. And I was like, I'm either going to get a flip phone or I'm trying to find a sidekick to see if that's feasible. And I started looking around and I was like, it's happening. People are going to start breaking away from this need to be stuck to their phone. That's also part of like the Neptune Saturn stuff. It's like we create the reality that we're feeding our brains, and where intention flows, energy goes. Literally, Mars Uranus, energy is going to go. So if your mindset is glued to a phone, glued to a TV, watching media at the edge of your seat, waiting to see what's going on with war, they've already got you. But if you put your phone down, and if you live in the moment and you decide to pay attention and be with your family when you're traveling over the holiday, have important conversations and really get to know your neighbors, connect with community and share diverse perspectives, we're going to realize we're not as divided as the news tells us that we are. We're not going to be as affected when there's going to be all of this kind of chaos and this conflict and this back and forth, and be that with war or what's going on, overseas, or even with the markets. Because in a way, that's what they're feeding off of. They want to see people freaked out and kind of concerned. Detach, be present, focus on your breath. The breath is going to be really important with this Mars-Uranus conjunction in Gemini, as is the Mercury retrograde, which is already saying that you should be really focusing on what's going on within your country. Not that it's not important to see how it's impacting everything else around, but Cancer is your country, your roots, your home. Instead of getting consumed with what's going on in the world, and quite frankly over things we can't change, and a lot of things that is just political theater, focus on what you can change right now and how you can start rewiring your brain to focus on what you can do rather than kind of getting stifled with, well, what's around us. I would also say that, that feeling that we're gonna get, that excitement, it means that we may also have a dopamine effect, that we're really into the thrills. And so we're going to see people who are like, look at these fireworks that I can set off. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to see all kinds of hands and fingers getting blown off. As much as I hate to say that, that is the nature of Mars and Uranus. We're also probably going to see that there's people who are going to be racing in their cars, and people who are going to be doing stupid stuff, or people who are going to be getting into arguments and fights, potentially with their neighbors or with their family members. So you want to kind of be mindful of some of that stuff as well. But that feeling itself of Mars-Uranus, I want to go fast, right, Ricky Bobby, is that signal from the transit that it's active and that it's trying to get you to feel alive. So stimulants, right? So any type of stimulant, caffeine, nicotine, even sugar, all of that stuff is definitely going to have people a little bit more so amped. So I would just be mindful of, where you're getting that stimulation from, whether it's something you're consuming, especially with Mercury retrograde. And I could definitely see a lot of people being like, yeah, we're getting our kids off of tablets, or we're deciding that we're going to, homeschool them, or we're changing direction with how we're kind of navigating. Was watching a thing, I think it was a thing on X the other day where this woman was on the news, and she was on the news because she was saying that she makes her son walk a mile around the neighborhood before he's allowed to have any time on his tablet. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what we should be doing. The information that's coming out right now is absolutely damning, both because of, I would say, COVID, just how much it's affected children cognitively, and a lot of them are behind. I was actually talking to a woman the other day in the grocery store, and she was telling me that she has a 5-year-old, and that, her baby obviously was around during COVID. and struggled so much because everybody was wearing masks and then also wasn't able to kind of like really participate in like preschool, that her child did not speak her first words until she was almost 4.5. The developmental issues, the communication issues, both I think because of COVID and also because we have so many kids that are plugged in and literally just desensitized because they are watching their tablet, they're watching TV, they're playing video games. And I get it, they're kids, right? Like, and it's summertime, so we're not gonna deprive them of everything. But I could see a lot of families changing direction in the way that they're navigating how their kids are responding. And obviously Mars and Uranus is like, you know, Gemini, two brothers that are kind of like fighting, you know, when you're on a road trip and you're like, hey, knock it down, knock it off back there. But I think parents are going to take a different approach to the way that they're looking at their kids, you know, using technology, and whether or not they're going to be saying, well, it's one thing for education, it's another thing if they're on it all the time. And they're going to be trying to incentivize kids to go and socialize, to play, to be outside, to have fun, to be physically active. Now, with that being said, we're going to see tech glitches just due to the nature of the conjunction. So I do think we're going to see people who are going to have accidents that could hit power lines. We could also see things like, you know, there could be transformers that are overheating or things that are blowing up or outages and issues that can be impacting social media. We could also see that the tech glitches and the communication breakdowns are kind of necessary. And while some people are going to get agitated, I think that there is like a method to the madness. So if you're noticing that you're having drop calls or your app is crashing or there's like autocorrect disasters, maybe you sent a message to the wrong person, you know, because you were, you know, texting too quick. This stuff is very likely going to be coming up over the next week. And then a sudden ending or a sudden beginning is also very common when we see a Mars-Uranus conjunction. So it's not gradual. So somebody will suddenly end a relationship or a job or a living situation, plans. With Mercury tied to this, we're going to see a lot of people that are going to be ending family relationships or reconnecting. We're also going to see people who are going to be suddenly ending leases, or they're going to be deciding to buy or sell or move. And I also think that some of us are also just going to be a little bit more accident prone. Unfortunately, Mars-Uranus is an aspect that does deal with accidents. So you want to see if this is happening on your ascendant or in your first house if you're a Gemini rising. I would also probably say my Capricorn risings, because the conjunction will be in your 6th house. That's what you want to watch for. And if you have any of those planets 0 to 5 degrees of the mutable signs, because you're going to be experiencing this square. Now, this could mean you're more accident prone, or you're just noticing there's more typos, or maybe you're dropping things, or you stubbed a toe, or you cut your finger, maybe having some close calls in traffic. Those are generally the kind of things that I would see. And it's because our nervous systems are running hot, and really your body is moving faster than your awareness or your brain. Watch for old kind of restlessness, maybe that's resurfacing, and just a general overall craving for freedom, for change, or to kind of escape what you thought you have been settling for. I also think that to handle the curveballs, you want to have, and this is something I've been trying to do, I've been trying to kind of have a built-in phrase before I respond to something. And I would just want to preface this by saying it's not forever, okay? This is just something I would be trying to kind of utilize in like the next month, especially the next week. But having a built-in phrase, just long enough to ask, am I reacting or am I choosing? And I think that's really going to help us escape some of the pitfalls of some of the transits this week. Even 10 seconds changes the outcome of a Mars-Uranus moment. So checking in with yourself, being like, is this a good idea? Do I just need to sleep on this? Am I angry? Really can kind of help you, I think, avoid some of the conflicts that can come up. I would also say, don't impulsively sign, send, or commit to anything that's irreversible, especially from July the 3rd through the 5th, if you can avoid it. Some decisions are going to come hot, they're going to come fast, and we're going to have to make that decision. We just want to make sure that we read the fine print. And if a decision can wait 72 hours, then wait. And more importantly, if the decision can wait until after the Mercury retrograde ends on July 23rd, then definitely wait. Sleep on it, and think through the wording before you decide to send anything via mail. drive like everyone around you just got hit with this transit too. I think this is something else that I've been kind of keeping in the back of my mind. I've just noticed even the last 2 days, just like driving around my small town, I'm like, what is going on? There's people who are speeding, they're suddenly stopping, they're pulling into lanes. And I'm anticipating with Pluto in opposition to Jupiter, we're going to see a lot of life-ending scenarios. Okay, and I've been seeing it. I've gotten hit by a wave of it recently. One of my good friends was just telling me, you know, she was like, I just found out my grandma died and that I was pregnant like the same day. And I was like, whoa, you know, Pluto and Jupiter being at a 4. My uncle on my dad's side just passed this week. And I'm just seeing a lot of friends that are going through, a lot of like family members that are kind of passing on. Honestly, you know, for the Pluto in Leo generation, this is a rough time right now because you guys are going to see Jupiter going over your Pluto. You're going to have Mars going through there. There's going to be eclipses there. So we are going to be seeing that, yeah, we're in a portal over the next month or two with the transits and the eclipses that some people are going on to the next realm. But with that being said, drive like everyone, you know, is going through these transits because they are. Create a little bit of extra following distance because people will suddenly speed up. They will suddenly stop. And have a little extra patience at the gas pump, extra caution when it comes to being on the road, you know, during the holidays. You don't need to rush to get anywhere. And I should have to tell you this, but don't be texting and driving. I would also recommend backing up anything important, which is mostly connected to the Mercury retrograde, but I could definitely see some people's phones getting fried, especially if they're overheating or they're being left out in the sun. This also means photos, documents, passwords, you know, have it physically, manually written down somewhere. In the off chance, we do see a major technological issue. Because Mercury rules ideas and Uranus rules the glitch that eats them. So a little prevention can definitely go a long way this week. And name the jolt out loud. Gemini wants it to be named. So when you feel that urge and electric, I have to do something right now sensation, literally say to yourself, this is Mars and Uranus. This is not an emergency. I am feeling that impulsive vibe. I know that there could be a powerful transition that comes through this, but let me check in with my emotions first and make sure that I'm not just overreacting. Naming it actually pulls you out of the reflex and it puts you back into the aspect of choice. And such an important topic, I think, with Saturn and Neptune being in Aries, that a lot of us want to still be in victim land, you know, with Neptune in Aries, and it's not in Pisces anymore. So life's tough, get a helmet. And Saturn is there, which is making us realize that in some ways, we do need to know our boundaries, and that could be with our words, that could be with our relationships, that could be with our speed limits. But it's also important to know when we stand up for ourselves, right? And that they're not just empty threats. They're coming from a place of, well, Mercury retrograde, don't mess with my clan, don't mess with my family, don't mess with my home, don't mess with my security, you know, and I take that very seriously and I'm willing to stand up and fight for it. Which is so beautiful because I think that's really embedded in American culture. It's very much embedded in how we were founded. I think there's a reason why you see a lot of Americans generally that are very patriotic, and Mars is associated with military. So we're going to see a lot of displays, I think, of military power and potentially even a lot of media and things that are very much connected to the founding of the United States. And I'm seeing it. I was like scrolling through, you know, some of my streaming, and there's like I mean, there's a bunch of them that Netflix just put out. I haven't started watching it yet, but like a whole 4-part series on, you know, the revolution and the founding fathers. I saw that, what's his name from Curb Your Enthusiasm? I always forget his name. He's doing some like history / comedic, you know, kind of series that's about, you know, the history of America. And it's all starting to kind of come up through media. How genius is that to, you know, take people who don't really want to crack open a history book or haven't gone through US history, you know, either ever or in decades, and create a streaming platform so people can go and watch this information and they can actually learn, and it can be kind of entertaining and inspiring at the same time. But definitely move your body instead of your mouth. And that is something I have been learning a lot. I really have to be honest with you. You know, maybe I have Mars and Uranus in sextile to each other, so I feel like I have that under pretty good control. But, you know, Pluto's squaring my Mars right now, while Uranus and Mars are in conjuncting it. And it's making me like realize that I'm like, man, I have to move and I have to have an outlet for some of this stuff. Otherwise, somebody's gonna get punched. So Mars wants you to act, right? And if you're feeling combustible in a conversation, stop what you're doing, put your phone down, go for a walk, right? Even if you have to just put 5 minutes on the clock and you're like, I will be right back, go for a walk. That's the best thing you could do. Work it out, clean something, maybe burn the charge off physically before you burn a bridge verbally, because I think a lot of you guys might be potentially doing that. And to really embrace this energy rather than just survive it, I think this transit really gets a bad reputation because it is the accident and explosion aspect in the sky. But Mars and Uranus at its best is actually genuinely one of the most liberating energies in the entire sky. So you have to ask yourself as you're going into this window, what have I been waiting for the right moment to do? And that doesn't actually need a perfect moment, right? And so life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. That's something that I always remind myself whenever I get a curveball. But I find myself doing that a lot. I'm like, this has to happen before that happens, before this happens, and then it's just gonna all fall into place. And what I'm realizing, especially with Saturn and Neptune and Aries, is it's the act of being, not necessarily doing. So there's a lot of things that we want to do, and that Mars-Uranus energy is, my mind is on, that kind of hamster wheel of I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do it now. But Saturn and Neptune is saying, become it. So if you're telling yourself that you want to be, more successful, you want to get a new job, get up in the morning, right? Have a routine, put on your suit and tie, dress up, and act like you're already at your new job. As crazy as it sounds, you have to get the mind on board with the actions, and that's where the magic is gonna happen. Otherwise, we're, like I said, a hamster, on the wheel, just constantly spinning, being like, why hasn't this happened yet? When we kind of remove that aspect of waiting for things to happen and we start acting like the person that we are becoming, that's where we start to see the change kind of take place. And so really, this moment that we've been waiting for, it just needs a spark. And so some of you guys will have that aha moment where you're going to lean into it and you're going to start acting, the role that you want to play in life. Others are going to have the curveballs that are going to come in that are going to force you into, the position or the precipice of, well, now I have to do it. And that might mean that we quit the thing, we're starting the thing, we're saying the thing. And if you've been overthinking it for months, likely this is actually your green light, especially with the trine to Pluto, to help you transform your future. I would also be asking myself, where in life have I been quietly settling for fine? Because change feels scary. Change is inevitable, right? We're gonna see a lot of astrology over the next year that is gonna be really reinforcing change. I think a lot of that is starting with this Mars-Uranus movement, but I think a lot of it's also, the nodes are about to change signs. We see Saturn and Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, Jupiter, all in air and fire signs. And so guys, we've had years of things being in water signs, at least the outer planets. That's over. It's done. Everything is now going to be full steam ahead, really up until we're getting into the fall. We're going to see some things slow down. And air and fire fuel each other. Fire and flames get bigger. So we can't stop this train, which is literally all of these alignments through the aspects that the planets are kind of having. So Uranus, one thing I know is Uranus does not do well with settling. As soon as it kind of starts to get into a sense of repetition and habit and consistency, it goes, no, I don't want that. So there has to be a sense of us kind of approaching life, sometimes our relationship, sometimes ourselves, with a sense of reverse psychology. And I think that if there's a part of your life that feels like it's been numb or it's been stagnant, expect this transit to really rattle it, and I would say, let it do that. I would also be asking myself, can I treat the unexpected as data instead of disaster? And this is something I've been trying to do when something comes up where usually I would be like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? What am I gonna do? I've just learned to take a second and go, okay, I'm observing that. Noted, got it. All right, taking that into consideration. Because when something shifts suddenly this week, your first question doesn't have to be, how do I fix this and go back to normal? If that's your immediate mindset, you're already losing the game. So it really can be, what this is actually showing you this week that needs to be seen. And it's going to put the pressure and it's going to expect you to act. We have to integrate the emotions of how we're going to adapt to the new normal. I think the real skill with Mars-Uranus isn't avoiding disruption. That's what I've learned. You really can't, and trying to control your way out of it 9 times out of 10 is going to backfire. And, the skill is to stay loose enough that when lightning strikes, you're already kind of moving, right? Instead of frozen. I used this kind of term when I was talking about Saturn and Neptune and Aries. They said, look, depression hates a moving target. So if you're not feeling great, get moving. And a lot of people have commented. I've got a lot of emails from people who are saying that was really helpful from them. And that's been something that really has been staying with me, through the last couple of years when Saturn and Neptune was in Pisces. A lot of us didn't want to get out of bed. We, wanted to keep drinking, watching the TV, doing the drugs, isolating. And now it's in Aries. So we have to get the show on the road. And I think that, the skill of staying loose, if there's any sign that's good at that, it's the mutable signs. In particular, I would say Gemini, because Gemini is going to go, have you tried this? What about that? How about we do this? How about we do that? It doesn't get into the nitty-gritty details of Virgo. It doesn't get too grandiose like Sag. It doesn't get too confused or, dissolving like Pisces. Gemini is the first of the mutable signs. And it basically says, let's throw everything at the wall and let's see what happens. So I think that if we can remain flexible, we can stay kind of open-minded, this can be one of the most exciting transits of the year. And if held tightly, it's going to be one of the more stressful. So same sky, different grip. Now it's happening at 3 degrees. So it's just like a double dose of Gemini. Obviously, when we think about degree theory, this is going to be carrying that energy of Gemini and Mercury, because 3 correlates with the third sign, which would be Gemini. Now, if you stay with me on this is fascinating because, Mars is action, conflict, and drive. Landing on a degree that is going to be carrying Gemini's energy means our mind is going to speed up. We're going to be feeling more passionate about the things that we're saying, about learning, about movement. And then on top of that, we're also going to be seeing the Sabian symbol. We're going to be rounding up to the 4th degree. And I've already mentioned this a couple times, but I'll just say it's holly and mistletoe. So it really talks about coming together, celebrating, anything that's going to be kind of associated with holiday and kind of celebration. But the deeper layer of this is ancient rituals, plants, symbols of life that are persisting through the dark. Obviously here in the Northern Hemisphere, we have holly and mistletoe during the winter months around Christmas. And it talks about things thriving even when we have disruptive cycles like the cold winter, right? So when we put these layers together, the Mars-Uranus spark, I think it has this undertone of new ideas about the way that we look at how we can thrive and how we can really, I think, learn to kind of grow and evolve even in the more kind of harsh or difficult kind of transitions. It also talks about the full picture becoming clear, that this sudden jolt of energy in service of protecting and preserving something is really something that really matters. And that could mean family, that could mean things that we have to say, it could mean relationships, it could mean pursuits that we feel like we kind of have to go on. And there's one thing I know, it's not going to be boring, it's going to be very exciting. And it's really the very first shot that's going to be leading to the drama that's going to be coming at the end of the month. And so I want to show that to you guys. This is a little bit of a preview, but the next full moon that we're going to have, let me make this Aries rising, sorry guys. The next preview that we're going to have will be on July, looks like it's going to be July 28th, 29th. Okay, so we're going to have a full moon. It's going to be in Aquarius. Why is this important? It's important because it's feeding off of whatever happened during the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So at the end of July, we're going to see the moon and Pluto come into conjunction, very close to the United States natal moon. And then we're also going to see now the North Node is going to be in Aquarius. So this is not an eclipse, it's not close enough, but it is kind of highlighting or bookending the eclipse that we had in February of this year. So this is just pure potent Uranian energy. Conjunct Pluto, trine Uranus, the exact same aspect that we see between Mars and Uranus that's going to start around the 4th of July. By then, Mars is going to be at 21 degrees. So this tells me that when the United States has its Mars return, this is when it's going to be executing its kind of power. It's going to be having the conflict. There's going to be the brawl. And obviously Sun conjunct Jupiter is bold leadership. Now this could be leaders that are leading with heart. This could be leaders that are leading with ego. And obviously with the opposition and the full moon, where Jupiter opposes Pluto, this is going to be the response to whatever drama has been started earlier in the month. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to show you guys where this is going to be taking place for the 12 rising signs. I'm going to be looking at this under the lens of the Western whole sign system. So I recommend listening to your rising sign first to see exactly which house this is going to be taking place in. And that also can go along with you listening to your sun sign. The sun sign is going to be more about how it's impacting you personally, your ego, maybe your career. The moon sign is what's going to be impacting you emotionally or kind of like in your private life. If you have anything around 0 to 5 degrees of Gemini, get ready because this is going to be big for you. Equally the mutable signs. And if you have a sun, moon, or rising in Gemini, best believe you want to be listening to the Gemini kind of horoscope because it's going to give you some very valuable personal information. Now, I'm a Placidus user through and through. So those of you guys who are a Placidus user, you may have to listen to more than one rising sign so that way you can see exactly where the Mars-Uranus conjunction is taking place. And boy, it's gonna be exciting. So listen to whichever one strikes your fancy. I've seen some people commenting saying they listen to their solar return ascendant sign. You could do that. You listen to your solar arc or your secondary progressions. You could totally do that, especially if you have anything around those degrees. My solar arc moon is right around 2 degrees of Gemini. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So I'm getting lit up by it. But let's start with my Aries and my Aries risings. Let's see what's going on for you guys. Obviously, you're kind of like a supporting character in this transit. And part of it's because it is making aspects to Neptune in your sign. But more importantly, Mars is actually your chart ruler. So it deals with your first house of yourself, your actions, your body, and wherever Mars is where you are. So you would be one of the signs that I would be like, hey, careful with potential accidents, right? This particular week. If it's driving, if it deals with heat, electricity, wiring, dealing with vehicles, things that are connected to your hands, stuff that's sharp, be cautious because you're more prone to having issues in this department. Mars also deals with your 8th house of psychological themes, sex, passion, joint finances, inheritance, debt. So when Mars and Uranus come into conjunction in your 3rd, it's pulling from Uranus connection to your 11th house, your goals, your friends, your allies. I'm hoping that you guys are having a blast. You guys are traveling. Maybe you're going somewhere. You're hanging out with your siblings. You're really excited to share, to connect, and to communicate because really that's what this chart wants you to do. Now, with that being said, the 3rd house is communication. So with Mars and Uranus being here, I would expect that there's going to be a sudden conversation or a piece of information that changes your plans very quickly. With the trine to Pluto, the next day landing in your 11th house, that sudden information may ripple out into your friendships or some kind of group that you're a part of. One of the things I would say for you is don't sign anything important around the 4th or the 5th. Gather the data and the information first, then act decisively once the trine starts to kick in. But very curious to see what happens for you guys. I don't know where this information is going to take place. Keep an eye on your neighbors, your siblings, and your family because likely it may be impacting moves, travel plans, or things that involve vehicles. Good luck, Aries. Taurus and Taurus rising. You guys are going to be seeing the Mars-Uranus conjunction taking place in your natal 2nd house. And obviously Mars is tied to your marriage, your partnerships, clients, spouses, and it's also going to be tied to your 12th house of what's hidden, what's secretive, self-sabotage, undoing, hidden enemies, while Uranus is tied to your 10th house of career and reputation. So something electrifying is happening, and it could be literal when it comes to your finances, like a sudden pivot when it comes to expenses, potentially having to suddenly buy something, having to suddenly sell something, or just an upgrade when it comes to your values or your income streams. But the other thing that I think about for you guys is that there is almost this speeding up of something that's going on professionally. And with some of the aspects that you see between the 2nd and the 10th house, you suddenly might feel like, okay, because there's some pressure from a spouse to make more money, you're like, okay, I'm trying to figure out a secondary income. There could be arguments and conflicts with partnerships over finances. Simultaneously, there could be this drive to make more, to innovate, to have more financial freedom, to diversify something about your spending habits, your resources, or your job. and kind of feeling like you're ready to kind of make some very powerful money moves. Now, with that being said, I think that the sudden shift in your resources is very likely. I look at Mercury kind of influencing this retrograde in your third, and there's definitely a reevaluating documents, conversations, potentially even ideas revolving around your finances. And the trine to your 10th house the very next day is likely going to bring a powerful realization tied to your career and your public reputation. Taurus, stay flexible. Okay, I know, easier said than done. It's about not being reactive and letting the bigger picture kind of clarify before you commit to anything financially or taking on anything new job-wise. At the end of the day, though, Taurus, I can tell you that I think this is going to be good for you. You just have to really make sure that you understand, you read the fine print, you communicate through everything before you make any big money moves. Good luck. All right, Gemini, you are in the spotlight. You are the main character of this particular transit. So pay attention if you have anything the first 5 degrees of Gemini. Mars and Uranus are going to be meeting in your sign, sitting in your first house if you are a Gemini rising. Mars is tied to your health, fitness, your pets, your habits, and your work. It's also directly tied to your friends, goals, and allies, and social opportunities. So I love Mars transit in the first house. It gives you a reason to get up out of bed in the morning and get things done. I think that a lot of you guys would benefit from movement, and whether this is traveling, if this is going to be things connected to fitness classes, moving your body, being a little bit more active, having a morning routine, getting up and having a mantra, right, is something else that I think would be really beneficial, or even some breathwork exercises. Now, Uranus is tied to your 9th house of travel, philosophy, the higher mind. And so a lot of you guys just feel like you've got the travel bug. Maybe you are suddenly really excited to be teaching, to be sharing with groups of people, to be traveling with friends, and you just probably feel like you stuck your finger in a light socket. You are one of the signs, because Mars and Uranus is meeting in your first house and it's tying in your 6th house lord, that you do need to be more cautious because you are more accident prone. Now, that's not me saying something will happen, but this could be, accidents at work, accidents while you're traveling, where maybe you're doing some, social kind of themes. And also just be cautious with putting your foot in your mouth. I think that's something else that you can say. Due to the nature of Mercury retrograde influencing this, I could see a lot of you guys making some very big impulsive purchases. And that could mean home purchases, Cancer, travel purchases, potentially feeling a little kind of erratic and that you kind of have to act very quickly on an expense. Or if there is unexpected travel or educational pursuits, you kind of have to plan for it and structure your budget. Now, on the other hand, this could mean that there is a sudden urge to break free from something that's felt confining. So with Pluto that's going to be in a trine with Mars and Uranus here very shortly after, to me, this kind of feels like, okay, it's not just a mood swing, right? Mom, it's not just a phase, Mars and Uranus. It's connecting to your beliefs and also your worldview, potentially even travel. So if you channel this into something good rather than reckless, I think you're going to have some pretty decent results. I do think that I would keep an eye on, digestion. I'd keep an eye on breathing. I've talked to some Gemini risings over the last week or two, and they're like, I'm having panic attacks, or I'm stressed out about work, or I'm dealing with a health issue. And I would just say, breathe, ground yourself in the breath, because it's very easy to get all wound up and want to have conflict, want to have fights, or just be so frazzled over something that's constantly changing right now that you don't know how to ground. With that being said, anything that's hot, electric, sharp, tattoos, very Mars Uranus to me has always been kind of like aspects connecting to tattoos, piercings, feeling like you want to drastically, change something about your appearance, your style. I think that it actually is a phase, and I say that lovingly, Gemini, but Mercury's retrograde in your 2nd house, which is about your style. And I can tell you, having gone through similar aspects myself with these similar transits, I think back to a time where I was having an aspect between Mars and Uranus and my ascendant, and I had a retrograde in my 2nd, and I was like, out with the old, in with the new, got rid of all of my clothes, decided I wanted a very specific aesthetic look, and convinced myself that I was like, yes, I am going to be wearing nothing but rockabilly clothing. I mean, it was absolutely fucking ridiculous, but I convinced myself of that. And after getting all the clothes, after getting all the, you know, kind of extras, and then realizing I'm having to commit to wearing red lipstick every day, putting my hair in pin curls, all of that stuff, I was just like, what was I thinking? This was not me, and literally had to change my entire wardrobe. So something that I would say is try things that are temporary right now. Buy a wig, you know, get some clip-in bangs, wear a fake nose ring, get a stick-on tattoo. I don't care what you have to do, but I'm convinced that it's a phase. Give yourself a little bit of time. You want to be rebellious, just try to do something that's temporary. And if you like it, then you can do it in the future. So good luck, Gemini. All right, Cancer and Cancer risings, you guys are going to have the Mars-Uranus conjunction taking place in your natal 12th house. Believe it or not, you're a supporting kind of character in this as well, even though you're one of the signs to be least physically impacted by the Mars-Uranus conjunction because it's in your 12th house. So the 12th house is the subconscious, it's hidden things, it's stuff that's private, maybe something that's buried surfaces suddenly. And this is very much tied to the Mercury retrograde in your sign. So Mercury is your 12th house lord, so it's about secrets or things that you have kept to yourself. So your text messages, your emails, your data, private conversations, things like that, especially with gadgets, with siblings, or with neighbors, can now like suddenly come out. Like you could actually accidentally out yourself if you've been trying to keep something private. Mars is tied to your 5th house of romance, creativity, and self-expression, as well as your career. So I could see some of my Cancer and Cancer risings that are kind of like nervously going back and forth, being like, are they going to text me back? Are they going to call me? You know, or there is this restlessness that's kind of keeping you up at night. I'd keep an eye on your health, just due to the nature of Mercury retrograde, and also the fact that Mars and Uranus are meeting in the 12th. So you could be feeling like you're not sleeping well, you're up all night, you're more prone to having like respiratory infections, you're more prone to having fevers. There could also be all kinds of crazy things kind of going on with your sleep. So you just kind of feel a little irritable, I mean, I think, or moody, crabby, I guess I should say, with the Mercury retrograde as well. With the trine between Mars and Pluto that's going to happen the next day, you're going to be seeing that trine will go to Mars to Pluto in your 8th house. And this is really suggesting like a deep transformative dive, maybe information coming out, maybe a psychological breakthrough, maybe a breakthrough with intimacy or shared resources that ultimately settles things out. And I would say don't dismiss whatever surfaces for you intuitively or in dreams. Talk through it with somebody you trust. But I think a lot of you guys are going to have a breakthrough psychologically, be that in just having a realization or working with a therapist, or maybe it's a book or a meditation or something that you're doing to kind of calm your nerves. So that way you guys are feeling a little bit better settled. And definitely watch for your intuition to be on overdrive. Good luck, Cancer. Oh, Leo and Leo risings, you guys are going to have this Mars-Uranus conjunction in the natal 11th house. To me, it looks like a party, to be honest with you, you know, especially just due to the nature of like the sextile to Jupiter. Even though I know some of you guys are kind of feeling like you're just kind of enjoying the last bits of your cocoon phase, but Jupiter is in your sign now, so it's time to kind of step out into the limelight. And I think party. I mean, Mars and Uranus in the 11th house. Uranus loves being there, first of all, because this is a house it's associated with. So parties, opportunities to meet people, as Uranus rules your 7th. So whether this is networking events, going to parties, making friends, connecting with neighbors. And then Mars is going to be about travel, your belief systems, and the higher mind, as well as the 4th house of home family. So I could see you guys doing some like family gatherings, hanging out with friends, potentially there being some, you know, block parties or some travel maybe for the holiday. And I'm especially liking the fact that Mars is going to trine Pluto shortly after, because there can be an opportunity for there to be a love match because you meet somebody at somebody else's home or somebody else's gathering. So if you're single, pay attention. Now, that being said, the 11th house here really tells me that a friendship could also shift very quickly. And whether that means you go from being friends to being something more, or maybe there is a confrontation or a bit of like a conflict with somebody that you have in person or at a gathering or even online, people might be kind of coming for you in the comments, and it can result in there being a bit of like a falling out or an unexpected alliance. So it depends on how you use this. The trine to the 7th house tells me that this disruption may actually transform a one-on-one relationship or a partnership. So it might mean you have to confront something. You might have to talk to your audience about something. Stay open is what I would say. Obviously, you're going to have a bit of like a riley, kind of a rowdy bunch that you're going to be spending time with at the beginning of the month. And I think you're feeling very inspired and very incentivized to kind of connect with new, unusual and kind of eclectic friends. But definitely a ramping up of some of your goals, especially if you're wanting to travel or learn with other people. And honestly, it's going to get you out of the house. And the Mercury retrograde is playing off of that as well, because Mercury's looking back at your 11th house where you're like, I really don't feel like socializing, but okay, I'm going to go. And then you walk into the party and everybody's like, oh my God, you're here, and like you realize, oh wow, I am wanted. I am kind of accepted and loved. So have a good time with it. Start to watch for where your goals are really, I think, on the up and up, and they're developing quite swiftly. Good luck. Virgo and Virgo rising. This is the transit that I know I've been antagonizing you guys about for the last several weeks. So hopefully it's good. You're going to see Mars and Uranus meeting in your natal 10th house of career, reputation, and obviously your social status. So whether you work or not, this is how you show up out in the world. Mars is tied to other people's money, resources, change, and transformation, as well as the 3rd house of communication, connections, messages, emails, meetings, while Uranus is going to be directly tied to coworkers, work, health, and habits. So this is the big conjunction that I was saying, where I'm like, okay, Virgo, you're going to see that there's either diversification where you're doing this and that, a sudden speeding up of your career trajectory, working more than one job, or a dramatic change happening with leadership, the job or the career that you're kind of working in. And the one thing I would say is potentially your Jerry Maguire moment. So, when you think about that movie where he comes in and he's just kind of like miffed about everything, and he's like, who's coming with me? And he leaves that big agency where they're, representing, famous people or athletes. And Renee Zellweger, comes with him and he grabs the goldfish and they walk out together as a pair. This is how you're really speeding up and developing the change and the transformation that you're going to be having at work. And that could be positive, where you're kind of working with another person, transforming the way that you make money, whether that's taking on a business partnership, or potentially it means that you're going to be building something with a friend or maybe with another person that you've worked with in the past. But this could also be a transit where there's like a rage quit, or there's going to be layoffs, or suddenly somebody at the top kind of gets knocked out. With Mercury influencing this, and it's your chart ruler too, it's retrograde in the 11th, your goals are shifting, revolving around what you want to do work-wise. And it's almost like you've been in this holding pattern where it's been hurry up and wait, and now things are going to start to open up. Networking with other people, group exercises, team building exercises, where the teams at work there's a consensus about what needs to change or what's potentially kind of coming is what I would watch for. I think it's been a lot more potent for you in Pisces because it's been squaring the north and the south node. So whatever dramatic change with your status or your association or your career is helping you get out of overanalyzing, all of the details. Should I do it? Should I not do it? I would be like, you're going to act on impulse likely in the next week, and it's going to require some kind of support that's going to come from another person. And you will definitely feel that, because on the 4th, here comes the moon through the 7th house of relationships squaring this. So you're probably going to have a bit of a back and forth, maybe with somebody at work. Maybe it's going to be about a friend. Maybe it's a situation involving a relationship, and that's putting pressure on your career in some way. But watch, there will likely be a disruption at work. And thankfully, the Mars-Pluto trine to your 6th house ultimately is going to reshape your daily routine and your work environment, I think, for the better. So this is genuinely a good window for innovation if you can stay grounded instead of being impulsive when it comes to your career. So you guys are gonna have to let me know what happens, but yeah, this is a big one for you guys. I've got quite a few Virgo risings in my practice, and all of them have been like, well, my office manager quit, and my lead person quit, or we're having to change offices. And I would be like, cool, just go with the flow. Like, this is what's supposed to be happening. Innovate, change, evolve, bring technology in, or try to find ways to work smarter, not necessarily harder. Let me know what happens, guys. All right, we've got Libra and Libra rising. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a Libra rising. I'm saying this because like you're the one sign that is unfortunately, I guess fortunately, not necessarily getting hit as hard as some of the other signs. And especially if you have anything 0 to 5 degrees of Libra or Libra rising, you're going to see that there's going to be a grand air trine because you're the missing kind of sign from Aquarius and Gemini. So the early Libras are actually going to do, I think, a little bit better with this than some of the other ones. Now, with that being said, the Mars-Uranus conjunction is in your 9th house. So what is the 9th house? Your beliefs, gurus, teachers, legal matters, travel, where everything kind of opens up. And likely with Uranus having been in this sign off and on for the last year or so, a lot of you guys have noticed that your mindset is changing, revolving around how you look at your beliefs. Maybe you believed this one day and now suddenly you believe that. A lot of you guys have an interest, I think, with Uranus being there in having a different perspective when it comes to romance, children, self-employment, creativity, love, having fun. And now you're really wanting to teach or to write about it or to travel and share some of your experiences with other people. Now, with that being said, Mars-Uranus is still disruptive, okay? So you're going to notice that Mars is connected to your relationships. So whether it's clients, if it's going to be spouses, if it's going to be business partnerships, and Mars is also connected to your money and your resources, your values. So on one hand, I could see with Mars and Uranus in the 9th house, suddenly you're willing to spring some money to travel. And if you're a single Libra, get out there because traveling might actually allow you to suddenly meet somebody and fall in love. So if you're going to the airport, look good, don't be looking like a scrub, communicate, talk to people while you're out and about and you're doing things. If you're in a committed relationship, you might find that, you're feeling like, okay, we're a little restless, we want to travel, we want to go somewhere. I could also see that the darker side of this transit is some of my Libras and Libra risings are going to potentially be facing a sudden legal situation. This is really connected to the Mercury retrograde. So some of you guys might be saying, well, there was wrongful termination. Do I need to talk to a lawyer? It could also mean that some of you guys are suddenly feel called to get a higher education, get a degree, to maybe travel and kind of say, hey, I'm taking a bit of a hiatus from work, or I'm kind of working away from, feeling like I have to be responsible for everything that's kind of going on professionally. It really depends on your personal chart. But I would say an unexpected trip, sudden, change of plans, or a belief that gets challenged out of nowhere is likely. And what you will find is that the trine that's going to be happening to Pluto in your 5th house the next day really suggests that whatever shifts will ultimately flow into your 5th house. So more creativity, transformations in love, transformations regarding children when it comes to self-expression. And so I would encourage you to stay curious instead of defensive and really be willing to learn about culture, about travel. Maybe you're learning about new creative endeavors. Maybe you're looking into, how you can legally protect some of your creative projects, your intellectual property. As a Libra rising the last week or two, all of these things have kind of happened for me. It's been me being like, do I have to suddenly travel to go and be with family? How is my mindset shifting around, my hobbies? What do I want to take a class for just for fun? What trips am I going to be planning, with a partner later this year? So it's happened all for me, but maybe for you guys, it's just this shift in your mindset where you're like, I deserve love. I deserve fun. I can have spontaneity. I can go places even if it's for a quick weekend. Just keep in mind that Mercury is retrograde. So you're going to be impulsive to get somewhere or to do something, but there is going to be a slowdown effect that's going to happen simultaneously. So let me know, Libra, how you guys are feeling with that. Scorpio rising, important transit for you, Scorpio. I've been reading your guys' comments. I know that a lot of you guys have been like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I would say, chill out, okay? Just take a breather, because not everything is going to happen the very first week. And to be honest with you, Aries and Gemini are the fire starters, because Mars is meeting with Uranus. So there is likely going to be some things that you have control over how some of this stuff goes down, okay? Mars rules you, your body, your actions, your drive, your passion, your transformation, and it's moving through Gemini in your 8th house. And something I would say, is the 8th house is very familiar territory for you, Scorpio. What's scary, what you don't want to talk about, where you've been hurt, where you've been vulnerable, you don't want to be exposed. psychological nitty gritty, all of that stuff is the 8th house. And you've just recently become familiar with Uranus kind of going through there. By the time you get to the end of the transit, something you're going to notice is that not much scares you anymore, right? So that's the good thing. The other thing that I would think about is that Mars is also tied to your health and your habits and anything that deals with your pets, potentially even your work. And it's really tied into Saturn and Neptune, where a lot of you guys have been like, yes, I want to change jobs, or yes, I'm really working on, my physical health and my habits. And yes, I am feeling like I'm drowning with work. And I would, on one hand, look at the psychological effect of that, in the 8th house. Where can routine, habit building, and physical fitness actually be really good for you psychologically, because you can blow off some steam. Sex can be better. It can be sudden. It can be exciting. There can be more spontaneity. But the other side of this is that Uranus is telling me that you feel like you need a breakthrough. And the 8th house is inheritance, taxes, other people's money, investments, joint property. So, maybe it's going to mean that you're a little bit more kind of open with sudden developments and changes with your financial strategy, with your partnerships. Mars could mean, there's a sudden expense that's kind of connected to your health. Maybe you're having a change in your benefits, your health insurance. Maybe your car insurance goes up. It could also mean, with the ties to Uranus ruling your 4th house, that you are now breaking free from some of the ancestral patterns of what you thought you were. Gemini is a sibling, right? So I think a lot of like siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins. What have people always said about you? And where has that become a part of a storyline where you're like, well, this must be who I am? Part of the nature of Mars conjunct Uranus is you going like, no, I don't have to accept that. And the 8th house is about other people that are also going to be kind of contributing to your personal or kind of, financial change. What I like about this is that there's going to be new innovative solutions that you're going to come up with through the 8th house to actually bring about changes in your home. For example, I would say, well, do you have a conversation with your partner about being like, should we refinance our mortgage? Or should we kind of move around some of our investments? Should we put something into something that's going to be a higher yield? Mars does cut and sever, so it could also mean that you are breaking away from certain relationships within the family, certain financial relationships, changing banks, that kind of stuff can happen. And what I like is right after you get through the Mars-Uranus conjunction, there will be a trine to Pluto, which is your other co-ruler. So they're going to be in harmony. So you're going to kind of strengthen and solidify now that there has been this sudden financial fluctuation or change. Now, with that being said, you can be a little impulsive, I guess I would say, when it comes to moving or changing your home. You can be a little bit more combative with other people, maybe about money. The key here to the 8th house is transparency and vulnerability. And you're seeing that through Mercury influencing these two planets going retrograde in your 9th. So it means that you're having to maybe spend some money on travel or education, but you're saying to yourself, well, how am I going to come up with this? How am I going to be able to fund, going back and getting a degree? Oh, maybe I can go and see if I qualify for a grant. Maybe somebody else is going to pay for it. Do I dip into my savings, or an inheritance in some way? Does it make sense maybe to look at my credit card and see where I can utilize some of my points so I have mileage to go on this trip that's going to be happening later next year? Solutions are really what I see coming for you guys. Not crazy about trying to do anything that involves lasers, anything that involves cutting, surgery, anything like that. Unfortunately, this is where it pays to know your chart. And if you're concerned about it, if you've got something like that coming up, talk to an astrologer. But I don't really recommend trying to do that stuff. And some of you guys are going to be trying to fight to get something refunded is kind of the feeling that I'm getting. So if a trip gets canceled, if something happens, if there's a crisis, or you're trying to use a credit or you're trying to get a credit, there's going to be a little bit of a back and forth with somebody, I think, about that. But because you're already a deep and intense nature, I think this is something you've been sensing for a few weeks. I think it's pretty fair to say with like the North Node square Uranus, there is inevitably going to be some psychological, physical, financial, sexual kind of breakthrough. And to me, it looks like a truth wants to surface, most likely in a close relationship, to be really honest with you. And, let it, especially with the Pluto-Mars trine, into your 4th house. This is supporting deep honesty around some changes that are going to be kind of coming up when it comes to your home and your family life. So very interested to see what happens for you, Scorpio and Scorpio risings. Very interesting. Let me know what happens. All right, Sag and Sag rising, grab a helmet. You guys are going to have Mars and Uranus meeting through Gemini, your opposite sign. So if you have anything 0 to about 5 degrees of Sag, Sun, Moon, or Rising, this is going to be quite dynamic for you. You guys are actually going to be experiencing a bit of a grand mutable cross, and then things start to calm down. All right, so that's the good news. Now, what is the 7th house? Other than opponents and other people, I think a lot of people have this inherent thought that the 7th house has to be, oh, my marriage, or it has to be, the person that I'm meant to be with, or my soulmate. But the truth is the 7th house are people who will stab you in the chest, not in the back. It's somebody who you work very closely with usually. It could be a business partner. Sure, it could be a spouse, but it could be a therapist. It could be an astrologer, right? 7th house. And Mars is going to be meeting with Uranus, and Mars is tied to your 12th house of what is considered hidden enemies, self-sabotage, things that have been hidden that are now coming out into the open. So this is a week where other people are going to be armory. There were things that you're wanting to confront with other people that have been on your mind, and now they're coming out. And it could mean, honestly, that there are some things you've been repressing, saying, or kind of dealing with other people, and now they're coming out suddenly. Mars also ties to the 5th house of children, pregnancy, dating, romantic connection, self-expression, creativity. So look, if you're a single Sag rising, this is a much easier transit to navigate because somebody could literally just come into your life. If you're committed, I think one of the things that I think about is where the complexity of there is romance and there is this kind of chemistry, and it's fun and it's exciting when you're dealing with the 5th house, which Saturn and Neptune are already kind of teaching you, there's more structure that needs to kind of happen in dating and romance. You need to be very clear about what it is that you want and what you're trying to build and create. On the other hand, Mars and Uranus is basically saying, if these relationships don't feel good in the heart space, or if there's issues with children, or maybe you're realizing you're not in love with somebody, or maybe there's some immaturity in the relationship, then it's going to get dealt with, it's going to get called out. Now, on the other hand, Uranus is very much tied to, your mindset, how you think, how you communicate. So you're going to find that you're suddenly wanting to talk to people about what's been on your mind, and they may react or respond very unexpectedly. Let's just say that. Having had Uranus go through my 7th house, and I think about it being a Mars-ruled house, and when Mars went through, conjunctions with Uranus, every single time it was like a period where I was like, okay, gotta give you some space. You just do what you gotta do because you're like fit to be tied. In this case, I think it's just gonna be more, you might notice your partners are just a little bit more chatty. They're a little bit eager to learn, to share. Maybe they're getting into a health kick. Maybe there can be a sense of them trying to incentivize you to be like, hey, let's move, or let's go on a trip, or let's relocate. And obviously, the opposition does not make it easy, but there is a real inclination with the squares to the north and south node that there are people who may be coming or going from your life in this next month. And it's not just romantic relationships. It could mean there's a therapist that comes into your life. There is a new business partner. Maybe there's an influx in clients. And it's really pushing you out of this feeling of, oh, I have to do the day in, day out grind, at work. It all has to fall on me. And, oh, I'd like more time at home and potentially, being with family or moving. And so suddenly the 7th house becomes people who can come in that are like, well, how can I work with you? Or how can I help you? Where's your frustration? Where are you experiencing issues? How can I help you work through that? And it's going to be pretty verbal, I think. Mars being connected to the 5th house of true love and romance, you're going to definitely see opportunities to connect with people. I would just say Gemini transits have always kind of taught me that people come in pairs. So somebody could be coming into your life while somebody's leaving. And that's pretty common with the 7th house. That's also grandparents is another theme that kind of comes up with the 7th house. And with Mercury retrograding, influencing this in your 8th, one of the biggest issues that you'll see in relationships is intimacy issues, communication issues, where we're not on the same page about, our sex life or our budget or our credit cards, where there is some truth that is kind of now starting to come out about, whether or not you feel safe or secure with this person, or whether or not something is being argued over when it comes to expenses or potentially things that involve children. Now, if you're single, you don't have kids, it'll be easier to navigate. Watch for people to come in. But those of you guys who are partnered, give your partner a little bit of space. because there is going to be this unexpected thing that can happen. Now, could there be a sudden severing of a relationship? Yes, that is possible. Mars-Uranus transits in the 7th house do work that way, but I don't think it's that easy. It almost looks like you're going to be weighing out the physical or the financial or the home kind of expectations or changes if there were to be a break in an alliance that you have with another person. Now, Gemini is also your neighbors and your siblings. So maybe you're having to confront a family, situation. Maybe you're talking, to a sibling or an aunt, uncle, cousin about, well, what's going on with an inheritance or who's paying for what. And then, somebody's getting angry and saying, hey, I want the documents. I want the receipts. And I would say, watch for that too. Positive is that Mars is going to trine Pluto. And this is where, with Pluto retrograde, listening more, speaking less, is really going to serve you quite well this week. I think it was Napoleon that said, don't ever interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. And I want that to stick with you guys this week, because somebody else is going to make a mistake. Somebody else is going to do something. They're going to say something, and you by all means have every right to react and respond. But if you choose to communicate differently and you let that other person act like a complete fool and they, kind of shoot themselves in the foot, it's going to have some pretty significant emotional and I would say karmic repercussions. And it would give you all the ammunition to be like, you said what you said, you did what you did. Like, you know what? I don't necessarily think we can move on from this. Let's have a clean break. And then you'll use the Mercury retrograde to kind of figure that out basically throughout the better part of the next month. Working with a therapist or an astrologer is highly recommended with this transit. And I would just say, look at the disruption as something that ultimately clarifies things and brings up more honest, direct conversations about, are we working together or are we kind of driving ourselves apart? So good luck, Sag. Godspeed. Let me know what happens. Capricorn rising. You guys are going to have Mars-Uranus conjunct in Gemini in your natal 6th house. You are one of the signs that I would say are more accident prone. I'm just going to put that out there now because this is in your 6th house, which is associated with accidents. However, it pays to be prepared. So if you know that it's coming, you're good. You're also going to notice that it's going to be in conjunct and quincunx your ascendant, you and Scorpio. So there are going to be some things that might kind of come out of left field. Now, Mars is going to deal with your home, your family, your living situation, maybe your parents or your emotions. And then it's also tied to your 11th house of friends, goals, and allies. So it's very obvious to me, some of you guys might just be very busy under this transit. Maybe you're busy, tackling home projects, or maybe you are trying to fix things in the kitchen, setting up an office. Definitely working out from home is something that I would recommend, especially if you can watch fitness videos, maybe you join an app. You have like a little designated space that you can be doing this from. I think that would be a great use of this transit. And especially an app where you can be tapping into it and doing it with other people. So let's say you get a subscription and there's like a challenge, an app that I really love is the Better Me app. You can pay for some of the challenges where they have like walking group challenges where you have so many hundreds or thousands of people who are doing a 30-day challenge and everybody has to get in their steps every day and you're increasing how far and how much you're walking and you know that you're a part of this collective that's all doing it together. It could be really helpful, especially if you're feeling quite isolated with the Saturn-Neptune transits. Now, with that being said, Uranus is going to be tied to your 2nd house of money and resources. So I know a lot of my Gemini and Gemini risings are saying, well, I'm actually looking for a second job, or I'm trying to start a side hustle, or I'm trying to make more money. Some of you guys are also just going to really feel this push to be a lot more productive and a lot more active. So whether that's working out, walking the dogs, organizing your office, getting things kind of clean and orderly at home, have a to-do list and really put a lot of value in getting things done. And it also could be a great time that if you're wanting to clean out your house or kind of get rid of stuff, you could sell stuff and then you could turn that into like almost like a side hustle business that you could do from Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist if you want to get rid of stuff. Now, on to the health things. The 6th house is accidents. Uranus can be connected to something that you eat. It can also be connected to something that you buy. And then obviously Mars is going to be for the home. So like, I don't want this being a week where you're like, I can do the, rewiring, or, maybe you bring a brother or a brother-in-law in or somebody to fix something. Sure, if they're certified, if they know what they're doing, if they can handle the task, great. Otherwise, hire a professional. Watch for issues with outages either at work or at home. Maybe it would be a good idea to have like a little bit of like a backup power source or something in the off chance that there is some kind of issue with the home, or maybe something does go down, so you know that you can still kind of connect, communicate, and charge stuff. Mars is also going to be potentially about working out with groups of people, feeling incentivized to be around friends, or maybe you're a party coordinator, you know, Capricorn. Are you the one who's like, hey, we're having a big party for the holiday, you know, it's my job to go and pick up mom and then also make the food and then also, you know, go and set stuff up for the kids. So you may feel like you're running around and you're just like doing a little bit of everything. But I think a sudden disruption to your schedule or your body's rhythm can happen. Now, with the trine to Pluto, what's really interesting is that you're going to find your trine to the second house is a powerful window for transforming your relationship with money or resources. Once the initial shock kind of settles, don't push through it, adapt. You're also one of the signs, like Virgo, who may suddenly notice, okay, it's time for me to get another job, or I'm quitting a job, or you know, a coworker quit. And then you're looking at this going like, oh, is this an opportunity for me to make more money? Is there now a new position or something that I can do that can actually really kind of grow my Pluto transit through the second house and feel like you have more resources coming in? Now, Mercury is influencing this. So it's retrograde in your 7th house. And I would say if I were a Capricorn rising right now and I was looking for a job or I was looking for a side hustle, I would immediately be like, okay, 4th of July weekend, I'm going to be trying to house sit. I'm going to be trying to watch some people's dogs. I'm going to be walking some dogs. Maybe I'm going to stay at home and have a bunch of, you know, neighborhood people who are going to be out of town and bring all their dogs over and say, hey, I'll hang out with them, watch a movie, do whatever I got to do when the fireworks are going down. It's going to be about $40 a dog. You make some quick cash. Uber Eats, delivery, anything that's connected to working from home, digital stuff is also a good idea. But I think that a lot of the Mercury retrograde is saying that there are some sudden, unexpected things that are happening in relationships that's sending you into a bit of a spiral where you're like, how is this going to be kind of impacting me? So sure, clients can cancel. You know, there could be misunderstandings and miscommunications in relationships. You could have a partner that's going through some issues, or, you know, they're traveling, or maybe they're having some health issues and you're like, I gotta jump in. And I've heard a lot of Capricorn risings telling me there's been conflicts with siblings, changes with jobs, and also having to kind of find a second side hustle. So you may have some of those things going on. Just take your time. Don't be rushing around trying to get, you know, too much done, and trying to multitask is something that you see with Gemini. So in the 6th house, it's like if you can do something close to home, or if you can do something that's associated with home property or services relating to such, it would be a better idea. And it'll also help you kind of better navigate the Mercury retrograde, where if you need to take your break, if you need to take a mental break from some of the relationship drama or changes that are going on, hit the gym. And I would recommend doing something that might be unusual, right? Uranus. Like, I think Mars and Uranus in the 6th house would be fun to go and do aerial yoga. I think it may be fun to do anything that's connected to breath work, or you know, anything that's connected to hot yoga, or anything that's like hot stretching. And the trine to Pluto is about really helping your confidence, and something that's kind of changing regarding the way that you feel about yourself. I think about times that I've had, you know, I have Pluto in the 2nd house. So when I've had Mars go through my 6th house, I always take stock and inventory on how am I eating? You know, what do I need to cut from my diet? What's creating inflammation? What do I need to be working on or working out? And naturally, you know, Gemini is going to be the guns. So a lot of you guys are going to be like, okay, I'm doing push-ups, I'm doing pull-ups, you know, maybe you're getting some barbells and you're regaining your confidence and making some shifts in your daily routine. But job changes, health changes can kind of happen here as well. So keep an eye on that. Good luck, Capricorn. Okay, Aquarius and Aquarius rising, certainly a supporting actor, I would say, in this week's drama. You're going to have Mars coming into conjunction with Uranus, your chart ruler, in your natal 5th house. One of my more favorite, I think, ascendants for this particular transit, not that it's necessarily easy to have a malefic hitting your chart ruler, but I think some of the aspects that are going to be happening are going to be quite interesting. So the 5th house in a nutshell is kind of like your stage, right? So whether you want to show a talent, you want to sing, you want to paint something, you want to create something, this is where you get to go and play, and you get to really kind of interact with your inner child. The fifth house is also about taking risks, and whether that's taking a risk on a new business, taking a risk on a romantic partner, having children, none of those things are guaranteed, but they are going to be exciting, and they can also potentially bring you some kind of joy. Now, with that being said, Uranus obviously rules you, so you're going to have quite the stretch of like 7 years with Uranus in your fifth house, where new and exciting, I think, interests and hobbies are definitely going to be coming up. Definitely a lot of blossoming young astrologers or people who are going to be learning it and using it as a hobby is something that I could see. And then you've got Mars, which is going to be connected to your third house of writing, learning, sharing, media, travel, siblings, as well as your 10th house of career are meeting in the fifth. And like so many of my Aquarius and Aquarius risings are writing Substacks, they're gaining a lot of traction in social media, they're writing their novels, they're starting their podcasts. And I think a lot of that has been kind of happening, for a while, over the last like year and a half since Uranus has been in and out of Gemini. So you're already, I think, ahead of the curve, which is generally what Uranus is about. But now that Mars meets, you're going to be like, I got to do it now. So what you're going to find is, this is a genuinely exciting transit. This is a transit where, you're going to have a burst of creative inspiration. There could be sudden romantic sparks, and there are some downsides too. I think we're more prone to gambling, taking risks. There can also be some quarrels that we can have with romantic partners. If you have children, your children can be a lot more rambunctious, over this next week. But it's also important to take a step back and be like, look at how much fun they're having. Like, have you guys ever seen like a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old watch fireworks for the first time? It's like when you take your kids to Disneyland and you see their eyes light up at the end of the night when they're watching the whole display. And even though you should be watching the fireworks, you're watching your kid, right? It's kind of like that. So it's about being in awe of something that you have created. What have you created? Mercury is retrograde. So you have created maybe a new job, maybe there's a new service, maybe there's a new calling, maybe there's a new purpose that's coming in. And it's really kind of highlighting where you're restructuring your schedule right now to make time for all of the things that really light you up. Now, I think that this may be go time, where some of you guys are like, okay, getting ready to launch, the blog, or I'm going to launch the new website, or, now I'm going to drop my, new YouTube channel. And it's going to be hard to say no to some of those things. I do think you're still working out the details, or maybe you feel like you need some help or some assistance with somebody who can kind of help you iron all of that out through the retrograde. Obviously, I say this as I touch wood, but the fifth house is also your children. So specifically your firstborn. If you've got a kid that's a little bit more rambunctious and, they're running around, they're doing stuff, you can expect some scrapes, of the knees, or kind of bumping their head or falling and hurting their finger, especially with Mercury retrograde. You're going to feel like you need to jump into being there to help or support your kid going through something, and you feel like you might have to kind of bandage something or check it out. So keep an eye on them. Mars Uranus in the fifth house also, I found that, the big risk, big reward. So if you feel called to go and start some new incentive, that you're working on, it could be something that could pay off. I just think it needs a little bit more time before you're really going to see the true effects of it. What's interesting is that it's going to be coming into a trine with Pluto, which is retrograde in your first house, where you're still reevaluating your personal power. Who am I? What am I doing in the world? What's changing about my identity? What's changing about my career? And really, if you're choosing joy, right? If you're choosing to go after the things that light you up the most, the things that are the most exciting, even though there's no guarantee of how it's going to play out, that's really how you're going to make the most of this transit. I just think back to like when I had Uranus going through my fifth house. And I remember when Mars and Uranus were going through my fifth house is when I got my first, astrology book. That same cycle, I also, got my first tarot deck. Came in twos. Now, it wasn't in Gemini, but it may be for you that there's two things that you're kind of juggling, or two projects. Watch for, love at first sight, or, some opportunity that kind of strikes when it comes to feeling inspired by a new romantic partner. And yes, some of you guys are going to have some shocks and surprises which involve children, be that pregnancy, or your kids surprise you, or there's some new talent that they have that they're wanting to show you. And I think the trine is really supporting that spark, and it's about kind of embodying really the art of creating, the art of joy, and participating in things that are going to make you feel like a kid again. So good luck, Aquarius. Very exciting transit for you guys. And my Pisces and Pisces risings, as with all the mutable signs, if you have anything 0 to 5 degrees, you're feeling a little bit of the pressure. I don't think any of this is new. I think you guys have kind of seen visions and kind of murmurs of some of the stuff that was kind of coming, especially over the last month or so with, Uranus squaring the north node in your sign and the south node in your 7th house, where there's been some rumbles that's kind of going on the home front. Now, Mars is going to tie to money and anything that deals with your values and your resources, physical, tangible things. It's also going to tie to your 9th house of travel, your belief systems, legal matters, the higher mind, your goals, your dreams, when it comes to your home, where you live, and also what you can afford. Now, Uranus is tied to your 12th house, which is interesting because it's almost like intuition, vision, family karma, foreign lands, things that are connected to, subconscious realms are going to be meeting in the 4th house. And so that's a little bit of a blind spot, Pisces. It does tell me that there can be some very shocking, surprising, unexpected things that could potentially be happening at home. And so the key word that I've used for this for Pisces is earthquakes. And that could be literal or figurative. Now, you may not live in a place where there's earthquakes, but if you do, right, or where there's tornadoes or where there is energy issues, pay attention. Mars is also about attackers. And I would say with Mars and Uranus in conjunction in the 4th house, good time to be making sure if you're leaving the house for a couple days, you want to make sure everything's locked up. Maybe invest in something where you can have a bit of like a security system, where you can keep an eye on what's going on. Maybe you have a sibling or a family member or a neighbor who's going to be keeping an eye on that. But there could be some sudden situation at home where you feel like the walls are kind of caving in. Now, with your family, it could also mean that there are some jaw-dropping things going on with your family, where there's some sibling rivalry, some drama with your parents. Maybe you feel suddenly like it's time to pack and move. If you've already had this feeling that you've outlived your space, there could be just that one thing that's like the event that is the straw that breaks the camel's back, where you're like, that's it, the neighborhood's gone shit, we're leaving. And being somebody who has Uranus in my 4th house, I think about times where I've had, Mars come into my 4th house and hit Uranus, and every single time it's like this shock and surprise, whether it's the internet that goes out or a lightning storm, that takes my, my power out, or, so I have so many stories, but what I can tell you is that it's going to be something you don't see coming. Now, here's what's exciting. Mercury is involved in this, and Mercury is tied to your relationships and also your home, and it's retrograding. So it may mean that part of this sudden excitement revolving around moving is, well, it's not that I'm moving, it's that my kid's moving back and they're going to be living with me, or they're living closer. It could mean that, maybe it's about being more kind of proactive with being at home with the kids over the summer. Maybe it means you're moving in or out of a relationship, and that somehow is going to be impacting your home or your living situation. Or quite frankly, you're like, I've already signed the lease, I'm in the process of moving, it's going to be a process during the retrograde, but I think it's going to make me happier, or I have a creative space now that I can be working from, or I'm moving in with a partner. So it's kind of sweet and salty. I think that, for most of you guys, a sudden shift at home is going to happen, and you will see this unfold over the month. Could be a move, could be a renovation, an unexpected family conversation maybe. And with the Mars-Pluto trine that's going to happen just shortly after that to your 12th house, this is a deep private inner processing that's taking place, and it's where ultimately it then begins to settle and kind of, dissipate. Stay flexible with your living situation this week, especially if you've got kids that are running around during the summer, or if there is some unexpected kids that are coming in. Pisces, you're going to have an eclipse on your ascendant next month. So my guess is that some of you guys may be experiencing that, and somehow that changes or alters the trajectory of just where or how you're living. And I hope it's exciting for you guys, and that if you guys are making moves, these are making moves in the right direction, and it's going in a direction where you feel like you have a little bit more freedom and obviously excitement. So good luck. All right, guys, well, that was quite the video. Obviously, across the board, the theme for this window is really the same. Expect the unexpected, especially around information, technology, conversations, and trust that some of the trines that we're seeing to Pluto is ultimately going to be where the real transformation is going to start to go. This is like lightning in a bottle energy, and it can genuinely spark breakthroughs. And if you guys stay grounded, then I think we're not going to be acting as impulsively and kind of adding fuel to the already kind of chaotic fire. If this helped you in any way, maybe feel a little bit better about what's happening or understand what's going on in the collective, please do give this video a like, consider hyping it and share it on your socials. We're super close to hitting 50,000 subscribers, which is kind of cool. So hopefully if you guys are new here, you stick around and you subscribe to my channel. I hope all of you guys have an awesome 4th of July. I hope you guys have fun and you stay safe and you see all the fireworks and all the excitement. Definitely let me know how this week plays out. Leave me your comments and your rising sign and what your Mars-Uranus moments are. And if you have this aspect in your natal chart, I'd love to hear from you guys and hear how it's manifested for you. I will be back tomorrow doing live tarot, so join me at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, Mercury retrograde, if you guys want to get your cards read. So you guys can click the community tab if you want to sign up in advance and get a reading. And if you guys want to get a reading from me, if you have questions about this transit, or if you have questions about aspects in your natal chart, solar returns, relationship readings, election readings, natal charts, I do it all. Click the links below and head over to beyondtheveiledtarot.com. You can see my schedule and you can book. I am booking in September and October right now. So if you are a Virgo or a Libra or a Scorpio and you want to get a birthday reading, I highly recommend booking that. And check out my courses and my astrology calendars while you guys are there. All right, have fun with this. Leave me your comments. I can't wait to see how July unfolds. And if you want more about July, make sure you guys watch my 12 signs horoscopes. Until next time, I'll see all of you guys very soon. Take care.